Welcome to History Teller YT, the channel where the past comes alive. Today, we embark on an extraordinary journey through time, tracing the footsteps of four brothers whose choices shaped the destiny of a people. From the winding banks of the Pulangi River to the fertile valleys and sacred mountains of Mindanao, this is the story of Tabunaway, Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. Through migrations, rituals, alliances, and unwavering faith in the spirits of nature, they left a legacy that continues to shape communities, traditions, and culture to this very day. Every river, every forest, every song and dance you will hear carries the memory of these ancestors. So sit back, relax, and let the rivers of Cotabato, the mountains of the Zamboanga Peninsula, and the enduring spirit of the Subanen guide you through the ancestral journey of the four brothers. By the end of this story, you will understand not just history, but identity, faith, and the wisdom of generations. Long before the chronicles of foreign kings reached the shores of Mindanao, the Pulangi River Valley already pulsed with life. The river was not just water, it was the breath of a civilization. From the mountains it surged, winding through fertile plains, feeding marshlands, and finally opening its arms to the sea. On its banks rose countless villages made of bamboo and wood, their houses lifted high on stilts to guard against floods. Smoke rose each morning from clay hearths where women pounded rice, while the laughter of children echoed as they played on the muddy shallows. Fishing boats carved from tree trunks glided like silent shadows across the water, their nets cast wide, returning heavy with tilapia, carp, and river prawns. In these villages, life followed the rhythm of the river, planting when its banks swelled, harvesting when its waters retreated, holding rituals when the full moon cast its reflection on the surface. The Pulangi was both mother and father, and its flow tied the people together in bonds older than any kingdom. For centuries, they called it simply the Great River. Only much later, when outsiders came, would it be renamed the Rio Grande de Cotabato. But to those born of its waters, no foreign name could capture the spirit of what it meant. A lifeline, a sacred thread, the place where beginnings took root. In the early centuries between 1200 and 1400 CE, the Pulangi Valley was already part of a vast web of trade and belief. Archaeologists today uncover shards of pottery decorated with swirling lines, glass beads of many colors, and iron tools buried in the earth. These were not ordinary possessions, but proof of a world larger than the valley itself. From across the seas, merchants sailed with goods, ceramics from China, brass gongs from the Malay Peninsula, cloth from Borneo, and trinkets from traders who had journeyed farther still. Such items found their way into Pulangi homes, treasured as gifts of prestige, exchanged in marriages, or offered in rituals to the spirits. But alongside trade, there was also knowledge. Shamans guided the people with chants and charms, calling on the Dewata, the unseen guardians of rivers, forests, and mountains. Every clearing in the woods, every bend of the river, every towering tree was thought to house a spirit, and so life was lived with caution and reverence. People planted rice not only with tools but with prayer, asking the river to bless the harvest. Hunters spoke softly to the forest before taking game, promising balance. Children grew up learning that the world was alive, filled with voices seen and unseen. This was the ancestral world into which four brothers would be born, a world vibrant and rich, but on the brink of change. Amid this flourishing valley lived a family of distinction, remembered in tales passed down from mouth to mouth, until elders recited them by firelight. This family belonged to the early rulers of Cotabato Plain, guardians of the Pulangi's heartlands. From their line came 4 brothers: Tabunaway, Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. They were raised with stories of their ancestors' greatness, how their forebears tamed the river's floods, built settlements from forest clearings, and welcomed traders with wisdom and courage. Each brother was marked with his own spirit. Tabunaway, the eldest, carried the weight of responsibility, learning the arts of leadership from his father and the blessings of ritual from the shamans. Dumalandalan, firm yet restless, had the heart of a wanderer and a mind always questioning. Gumabonabon was thoughtful, often seeking solitude by the riverbanks, where he listened to the chants of the wind. Mamulo, the youngest, was fiery, full of laughter, and carried a vision unburdened by the traditions of old. Together, the brothers grew under the watchful gaze of their family, running barefoot along the riverbanks, joining the fishing boats, and learning the chants of their ancestors. No one yet knew that destiny would one day divide them, that their bond, born of one river, will be tested by faith, power, and the tides of history. But in these early years, they were simply sons of Pulangi, bound to the waters that had nurtured their people for generations uncounted. By the middle of the 15th century, change stirred in the southern seas. From the coasts of Borneo, Malacca, and Johor came swift boats with sails stretched like the wings of great birds. They carried not only spices, gongs, and fine cloth, but also ideas that would transform the destiny of Mindanao. On the shores of Sulu and Cotabato, the first whispers of a new faith arrived with Arab and Malay traders who spoke of Allah, of prophets, of holy verses that bound men together beyond bloodlines. The Pulangi River Valley, once sheltered in the rhythms of its ancestors, now felt the pull of the wider world. At first, the villagers welcomed the visitors as they always had, for trade had long been the river's gift. They accepted colorful fabrics, polished blades, and jars of incense. But the strangers brought more than goods. They brought prayers whispered at dawn and dusk, words that spoke of one God greater than the Dewata of forest and water. For many, these words were strange, yet they carried an authority born of distant kingdoms and noble lineages. The villagers listened, curious yet cautious, for they had always known that new things from the sea could change lives forever. Over time, some began to join the prayers, learning to bow and recite, while others stood apart, clinging to the chants of their ancestors. It was a moment of crossroads, a time when old and new began to share the same shores, uncertain yet inevitable. Among the waves of traders, one name shines brightest in memory: Sharif Kabungswan. Around 1475 to 1500, he sailed from Johor, said to be of noble blood, tracing his lineage to the Prophet himself through his father Sharif Ali Zainal Abidin. To the people of Cotabato, his presence was more than that of a merchant. He was a leader with dignity, vision, and the power of faith. Kabungswan did not merely trade. He sought to establish a new order. With wisdom, he married into the ruling families of Cotabato, forging ties that turned his presence into permanence. Through alliances, he became the founder of what history remembers as the Sultanate of Maguindanao. Under his guidance, villages became organized into a network of leadership bound not just by kinship, but also by the laws of Islam. The call to prayer echoed across riverbanks where once only drums and gongs had been heard. Ritual feasts once held for the Dewata gave way to gatherings where the Quran was recited, and new forms of law guided disputes and justice. To many, this change was a path toward strength, uniting scattered settlements under one faith and one ruler. Yet with every new foundation laid, something old was set aside. For the people who had long danced to the rhythm of the bucklog and sung the epics of their ancestors, Kabungswan's arrival meant both opportunity and loss. It was the dawn of a new era, but also the shadow of division. It was in this moment of change that the four brothers of Pulangi faced the most difficult decision of their lives. Tabunaway, the eldest, saw in Kabungswan's mission not just a faith, but a future. He believed that Islam could bind the valley into strength, protect them from rivals, and connect them to the great kingdoms beyond the seas. With solemnity, he accepted the teachings, bowed in prayer, and embraced the new path. In return, he was honored, granted leadership as a Datu ally to the Sultanate, his bloodline woven into the noble fabric of Maguindanao. But Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo could not abandon the ways of their ancestors so easily. For them, the forest spirits, the river guardians, and the unseen dwellers of the mountains were not simply beliefs. They were life itself. To give them up felt like cutting their own breath. They feared that in embracing the new faith, they would betray generations who had lived and died under the eyes of the Dawada. And so, with heavy hearts, they chose not conversion, but departure. They would not raise weapons against their brother, nor curse his choice. Instead, they chose the path of migration, to leave behind the Pulangi that had nurtured them and seek new rivers to call their own. That decision, painful and irreversible, would forever divide the blood of one family into two destinies, one tied to the sultans of Islam, the other to the untamed spirits of the land. The Pulangi River, which once united the brothers, now became the witness to their parting. When Tabunaway took his oath of faith beside Sharif Kabungswan, the valley celebrated with drums, chants, and feasts. Yet in the quiet corners of the villages, unease spread like smoke in the wind. Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo walked along the riverbanks, speaking in hushed voices beneath the shadows of bamboo groves. How can we abandon the spirits who guided our fathers? Dumalandalan asked. His brothers agreed, for they still heard the whispers of the Dawada in the rustling of leaves and the flowing of water. But to remain in Cotabato was to live under the new order, where Islam was not only faith but law, where shamans were losing their voices, and where the river spirits no longer received the offerings they once had. Their choice was painful, for leaving meant tearing their roots from the soil that had raised them. Elders wept as they prepared. Women carried woven baskets filled with rice and tools, and children clutched the hands of their fathers. Songs were sung not of celebration, but of farewell. The people looked one last time at the Pulangi, their mother river, knowing they might never return. It was not rebellion, not anger. It was sorrow mixed with determination. The brothers chose exile, not because they hated their homeland, but because they loved their traditions too deeply to see them fade beneath the shadow of a rising sultanate. The migration began in silence. Dumalandalan led his followers westward, carving paths through thick forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. They crossed rivers swollen by rains, climbed ridges where the wind howled, and settled at last in the uplands of Lapuyan, Cumalarang, and Lakewood. There, they built homes beside mountain lakes and held fast to the bucklog, a sacred ritual of thanksgiving where dancers moved upon wooden platforms that echoed like drums, calling the spirits of the land. Gumabonabon, in turn, journeyed southward. His people followed the currents that led them to fertile lowlands and riversides of Pagadian, Takuran, and Sibigay. They planted rice in clearings, fished in streams, and guarded their stories with songs sung beneath the moon. Their lives wove together the memory of Pulangi with the gifts of new rivers. Mamulo, the youngest, restless and daring, pressed northward to Sindangan, Dipolog, and Katapunan. There, in valleys rich with game and soil, his descendants grew into one of the largest Subanen communities. Each group carried with them fragments of the old homeland, the chants, the rituals, the tales of the four brothers. And though distance separated them, one thing bound them still. Wherever they settled, they built beside rivers. For to them, flowing water was the breath of the ancestors, the path that linked past to present. Thus, across the Zamboanga Peninsula, the seeds of the Subanen were sown, their roots dug into new lands, yet always watered by the memory of Pulangi generations past. The name of the three wandering lines became one: Subanen, the people of the river. Wherever their settlements rose, from mountain lakes to coastal plains, their villages bore the same marks: bamboo houses raised above the earth, hearth fires where rice steamed, and ritual grounds where shamans invoked the unseen. The bucklog remained their greatest symbol, a gathering where the community danced in circles upon great platforms of wood, their footsteps echoing like thunder, believed to please the spirits and call blessings upon the people. Unlike the sultanates of Cotabato, the Subanen did not seek crowns or palaces. Their wealth lay in unity, in the songs passed from elder to child, in the rivers that sustained them. The memory of their departure was never forgotten. Elders recited to the youth how once there were four brothers born of Pulangi, how Tabunaway chose Islam and stayed, while Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo chose the spirits and walked away. These stories were not told with bitterness, but with pride, for through sacrifice they had preserved their way of life. Though outsiders would later call them pagans or mountain dwellers, the Subanen called themselves keepers of the ancestral bond with water, forest, and earth. Thus the departure, once a wound, became the very birth of identity. What began as sorrow turned into survival, and what seemed like exile became the foundation of a people who would endure for centuries. While his three younger brothers carried their people into the mountains and valleys of Zamboanga, Tabunaway remained in Cotabato, bound to the Pulangi that had cradled him since birth. He was not blind to the sorrow of separation, nor deaf to the cries of those who left. Yet in his heart, he believed his duty was different. As the eldest, he felt the weight of responsibility, and to him, the coming of Sharif Kabungswin was not merely an intrusion, but a chance to shape the future of the river valley. Tabunaway saw that Islam brought not only faith, but also structure, new forms of law, new alliances, new strength against rival tribes, and the looming threats of foreign raiders. By choosing to stay, he chose the path of survival for those who accepted the new order. His decision was not without conflict. Elders challenged him, asking why he would abandon the spirits who had watched over their ancestors for countless generations. But Tabunaway answered with solemnity, "The river flows forward, never back. If we do not flow with it, we will be left behind upon the shore." For him, embracing Islam did not mean forgetting his roots. It meant weaving them into something greater. The sorrow of losing his brothers was heavy, but he carried it as a leader must, silently, with the dignity of one who knows that history often demands sacrifice. Sharif Kabungswin, nobleman of Johor and bearer of Islam, recognized in Tabunaway more than just a local leader. He saw a man of wisdom, respected by his people, and bound by the river's legacy. Their alliance was not forged in haste, but through bonds of trust, sealed by marriage, kinship, and shared vision. Kabungswin offered guidance in faith, teaching the words of the Quran and the discipline of prayer. Tabunaway, in turn, offered loyalty, opening the hearts of the Pulangi people to this new order. Through this bond, the first Sultanate of Maguindanao was born, with Cotabato as its heart. Under the banner of Islam, small settlements were drawn into unity. Trade flourished, for Muslim merchants from afar now found kinship among the rulers of Pulangi. Coastal defenses were strengthened, and the Sultanate's influence reached across Mindanao. Tabunaway's role was immortalized not only in the memories of his descendants, but also in the genealogical scrolls called Tar Silas. His name was written alongside Kabungswan as one of the earliest rulers who embraced the new faith and bound his bloodline to the noble families of Maguindanao. Through this alliance, his children and grandchildren entered the noble houses of both Cotabato and Lanio, their lineage forever tied to the destiny of the Sultanate. Yet for all his gains, Tabunaway never forgot the price. The empty spaces left by brothers who chose the forest over the palace. The Pulangi, which had once echoed with the laughter of four brothers, now carried two stories in its flow. On one side stood Tabunaway, the Datu allied with the Sultan, whose descendants would help shape dynasties and defend Cotabato against enemies near and far. On the other side, hidden in the mountains, lived the Subanen, born of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, who danced the bucklog and sang the epics of the spirits. The river thus became more than water. It became a boundary between faiths, between ways of life, between visions of the future. Yet the bond of blood was never completely severed. In whispers, people told of meetings between traders where kin recognized kin, of stories carried back and forth, reminding both sides that they were once one family. For the Maguindanao Tarsilis, Tabunaway was remembered as a noble ally, a man whose choice cemented the Sultanate's foundation. For the Subanen, his name was remembered with a touch of sorrow, as the brother who stayed when others left. In truth, both legacies were born of the same root, the same Pulangi, the same ancestral womb. The division was painful, yet it ensured survival in two forms. One as rulers tied to sultans and Islam, the other as guardians of ancestral spirits in the mountains. Thus, Tabunaway's choice was not simply betrayal or loyalty. It was the forging of a dual destiny. From then on, Mindanao would forever carry the memory of two paths, both flowing from the same river of beginnings. The centuries that followed the brother separation were marked by storms of conquest that swept across the seas. In 1565, the Spaniards arrived in the islands, bringing with them not only soldiers and cannons, but also the cross. By the early 17th century, Spanish forts rose in Zamboanga, their stone walls and watchtowers casting long shadows over the coast. To the colonizers, the Zamboanga Peninsula was a frontier to be claimed, its people to be converted, and its rivers to be tamed. When Spanish missionaries and soldiers pushed inland, they encountered groups of Subanen who had settled in the uplands after leaving Cotabato. In their chronicles, the Spaniards described them as pagan mountain dwellers, untouched by either Islam or Christianity. But to the Subanen, the Spaniards were strangers who did not understand the land or the spirits. The Subanen had no desire for conquest. They sought only to keep their way of life alive, far from the struggles of sultanates and empires. When the Spaniards demanded allegiance, the Subanen quietly retreated deeper into the mountains. Where the invaders built forts, the Subanen raised ritual platforms. Where muskets thundered, the shamans sang chants. Their resistance was not through war, but through distance, a quiet survival that preserved their traditions. Yet even in retreat, they watched the world change around them. New towns rose on the coasts, trade shifted, and the Subanen learned that survival meant moving further into the shadows, holding tightly to their ancestral memory. For centuries, the Subanen made the mountains and rivers of Zamboanga their refuge. They farmed by clearing patches of forest, planting rice, corn, and root crops that grew in the rich soil. Men hunted deer and wild boar with spears and dogs, while women gathered fruits, herbs, and honey. Life was simple, but it was never without reverence. Every harvest began with offerings. A chicken sacrificed to the spirits, chants whispered to the unseen guardians of the land. Shamans remained central figures, mediators between human and spirit. Through their rituals, the Subanen remembered the Pulangi, the four brothers, and the journey that had brought them to these mountains. The Bucklog ritual became the heartbeat of their culture, a great Thanksgiving where the community gathered upon wooden platforms that resonated like drums. The echo was believed to reach the ancestors, calling them to join the living in celebration. In these rituals, memory was preserved. Children grew up hearing the stories of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, learning why their people chose the path of migration. Unlike the Maguindanao, the two who ruled over subjects, the Subanen lived in smaller, scattered settlements, bound by kinship rather than centralized power. Their strength was not in armies, but in endurance, not in kingdoms, but in communities. They survived not by conquering others, but by preserving themselves, hidden among rivers and forests where empires rarely tread. The Subanen lived in a world squeezed between two great forces, the sultanates of Cotabato and Lanio, and the colonizers from Spain. On one side, the descendants of Tabunaway and Sharif Kabungswan built dynasties that resisted Spanish conquest for centuries, raising armies under the banner of Islam. On the other side, Spanish missionaries and soldiers pressed inland, seeking to spread Christianity and break the power of the sultans. The Subanen stood apart from both, caught in the middle of struggles they had not chosen. They did not fully join the sultans, for their loyalty was to the spirits of nature rather than to Islamic law. Nor did they embrace the Spaniards, whose demand for conversion threatened their identity. Instead, they retreated further into isolation, creating a space of survival between two worlds. But this separation came with hardship. The Spaniards sometimes raided upland villages, capturing people for labor or conversion. Sultanate warriors occasionally demanded tribute, claiming the mountains as part of their realm. Yet the Subanen endured, carrying their rituals, songs, and genealogies like treasures too sacred to lose. By the 19th century, they were known across the Zamboanga Peninsula as a people apart, defined not by conquest or conversion, but by survival. In their hearts, they held the memory of the four brothers, knowing that their choice centuries earlier had preserved a way of life that neither sultans nor colonizers could erase by the dawn of the 20th century. The Subanen were no longer a small group hiding in the mountains. They had become a widespread people, stretching across the Zamboanga Peninsula, from the northern coast of Misamis Occidental to the southern valleys of Zamboanga del Sur, and from the fertile rivers of Sibigay to the highlands of Zamboanga del Norte. Their settlements dotted the land like constellations scattered across a dark sky. Each community bore the imprint of its ancestor. In Lapuyan and Lakewood, where Dumalandalan had once led his followers, the Bucklog ritual continued as a living symbol of Thanksgiving. Platforms were raised, drums resounded, and communities gathered to honor the spirits of the land and the memory of their leader. In Pagadian and Sibigay, Gumabonabon's descendants preserved chants, epic songs, and ritual prayers, carrying the oral tradition of the ancestors. These chants were more than art. They were history, teaching children the stories of migration, survival, and faithfulness to the spirits. In Sindangan, Dipolog, and Katapunan, the descendants of Mamulo became one of the largest Subanen communities, Their genealogies recited in gatherings where elders traced their lineage back to the youngest of the four brothers. Despite differences in dialect and local customs, all Subanen recognized one another as kin, linked by the rivers they settled and the story of their common origin. They were people of resilience, carrying forward an identity that had endured centuries of pressure from colonizers, missionaries, and the march of modernity. While the Subanen spread across the mountains and valleys, the line of Tabunaway grew strong within the courts of Cotabato and Lanao. His descendants, bound by blood to Sharif Kabungswin, became part of the noble houses that ruled under the Sultanate of Maguindanao. They entered into alliances through marriage, diplomacy, and kinship, weaving their name into the fabric of royal genealogies. The Tar Silas of Cotabato and Lanao, written in elegant script upon scrolls of parchment, carried the name of Tabunaway as one of the earliest rulers to embrace Islam and help establish the Sultanate's foundation. Through centuries of struggle against the Spaniards, the Dutch, and later the Americans, the descendants of Tabunaway remained key figures, guiding their people with a balance of tradition and adaptation. They carried the weight of their ancestors' choice, a choice to remain in Cotabato, to stand with Kabungswin, and to anchor their bloodline to the destiny of Islam in Mindanao. While the Subanen remembered Tabunaway as the brother who stayed behind, the noble houses of Cotabato remembered him as a founder, a bridge between the old ways and the new faith. Thus, even within one family's history, two legacies existed, one of noble courts and royal alliances, the other of mountains and rituals untouched by foreign faith. Together, these legacies wove the story of Mindanao itself, a land forever shaped by division and unity, conflict and kinship. To this day, Subanen elders recount the story of the four brothers when children gather around evening fires. They speak of a river in Cotabato, wide and powerful, where life once flourished. They tell of Tabunaway, the elder who embraced Islam and became a noble, and of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, who walked away to preserve the spirits of earth and water. The tale is told not as a myth, but as memory, part history, part genealogy, part sacred story. Through it, the Subanen explain their kinship with Muslim Mindanao while also affirming their difference. They are not outsiders, nor are they lost. They're kin who chose a different path, carrying the voice of the land within them. The rivers they inhabit today, from Sindangan to Pagadian, from Sibigay to Lakewood, are seen as reflections of the Pulangi, smaller branches of the great river that first gave them life. In rituals, they still call upon the ancestors, and in chants, they still name the four brothers, ensuring that their children never forget the choice that shaped their identity. For the Subanen, the story of the four brothers is more than legend. It is a compass, guiding them through the challenges of the present and the uncertainties of the future. As long as rivers flow and chants are sung, the legacy of the four brothers will endure, binding past and present in an unbroken chain of memory. When the Spanish Empire finally crumbled at the end of the 19th century, another power quickly rose to claim the islands: the Americans. By the first decades of the 20th century, American officials began to survey the lands of Mindanao, mapping rivers, mountains, and forests that had never before appeared on colonial maps. For the Subanen, who had long hidden in the folds of the Zamboanga Peninsula, this was the beginning of a new challenge. Unlike the Spaniards, who built forts only on the coast, the Americans pushed inland with surveyors, missionaries, and soldiers. They came with schools, laws, and a hunger for resources: timber from the forests, minerals from the mountains, and fertile land for new settlers. To the Subanen, This intrusion felt different. The Spaniards had threatened with sword and cross, but the Americans came with notebooks, rifles, and a system that slowly reshaped the land itself. Rivers were measured, mountains named in foreign tongues, and villages counted. Some Subanen welcomed the chance to learn in schools, sending children to acquire reading and writing, believing it might give them strength in a world that was changing. But others saw danger. The more the outsiders measured, the less space remained for their rituals, their hunting grounds, and their sacred places. In the forgotten valleys of the uplands, the Subanen clung to their way of life, but they knew the world was tightening around them, as if their rivers were being dammed by forces far beyond their control. With the American era came a new wave of missionaries, eager to bring Christianity to the mountains, carrying Bibles, medicine, and promises of progress. They built chapels near Subanen villages and called upon the people to abandon their spirits. For the missionaries, the Subanen were lost souls, untouched by the light of faith. But for the Subanen, the missionaries' words were echoes of the same pressure their ancestors had resisted for centuries. They remembered how their forefathers had walked away from Cotabato to avoid conversion. They remembered the tears of departure, the sorrow of leaving the Pulangi. Now that same challenge appeared again, but this time in their new homelands. Some Subanen families accepted the missionaries' presence, finding comfort in medicines, schools, and promises of protection. But many others refused, fearing that to kneel before another god would mean breaking the bond they had guarded since Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo chose exile. Shamans stood firm, continuing to call the spirits in rituals, refusing to surrender their chants. Yet the clash was unavoidable. Children raised in missionary schools sometimes looked down upon their parents' rituals, seeing them as backward or shameful. The community was split between old and new, tradition and change. In this struggle, the Subanen learned again what their ancestors had always known. Survival meant not only protecting the body, but also guarding the soul of a people. The most painful blow of the 20th century came not only from missionaries or soldiers, but from settlers. Encouraged by American and later Philippine governments, migrants from Luzon and the Visayas were brought to Mindanao, promised fertile land and new beginnings. To the settlers, the mountains and valleys of Zamboanga looked empty, waiting to be cultivated. But to the Subanen, every hill and river was alive, filled with spirits and ancestors. Slowly, their land were taken. Forests were cut down for logging, rivers diverted, and fields fenced. Subanen families who had farmed a valley for generations suddenly found strangers claiming ownership with papers signed in cities they had never seen. Displacement spread like fire. Some Subanen moved deeper into the mountains. Others were pushed into marginal lands where farming was difficult. The pain of exile returned, echoing the journeys of the three brothers centuries earlier. Elders reminded their children of the Pulangi, of how their ancestors had once chosen to leave rather than surrender their way of life. Now, once more, they faced the same choice: resist, retreat, or adapt. In this struggle, their story remained their strength. They told the children, "Remember the brothers. Remember why we are here. The river flows on, and so must we." Thus, even in loss, they found a way to endure, carrying their identity forward into a century of change. By the middle of the 20th century, Mindanao was no longer the hidden frontier it once had been. Roads carved into the dense mountains, logging companies cut through ancient forests, and settlers arrived in waves, clearing the land for corn, rice, and coconut plantations. The Subanen, whose lives were bound to rivers and valleys, found themselves surrounded by strangers. Some of these newcomers treated the Subanen with suspicion, calling them pagans or primitives. Others, driven by hunger for land, dismissed their ancestral rights altogether. The government in Manila, far from the mountains, issued titles and deeds without ever consulting the Subanen who had lived there for generations. To outsiders, these valleys seemed uninhabited. To the Subanen, every bend of a river and every tree had a spirit. The injustice was not always loud. It did not always come with battles or bloodshed. Instead, it came quietly, like an encroaching tide. Papers signed in offices, markers placed in soil, and orders delivered in languages the Subanen barely understood. Yet, in silence, they resisted. They held their rituals, even when missionaries called them evil. They tilled the land without titles, whispering prayers to the ancestors, as if to remind the earth that it still recognized its rightful children. They resisted not with weapons, but with memory, with persistence, with a refusal to forget who they were. In these years of pressure, rituals became acts of resistance. The bucklog, once a simple Thanksgiving ceremony, grew into a statement of survival. When a family built the great dancing platform, the entire community gathered, not only to give thanks, but also to declare, "We are still here." The sound of gongs and drums echoed through the valleys, reaching even the ears of settlers who did not understand. To the Subanen, every stomp on the bucklog was a heartbeat of identity, a refusal to be erased. Shamans and elders guarded the chants more fiercely than ever, teaching them to apprentices in secret when schools mocked them as superstitions. Each chant, each invocation of the brothers' names, became a reminder of their origin, a reminder that they were descendants of those who once chose exile over submission. Children listened to these chants in firelight, learning not just words but pride, courage, and belonging. Even as the world beyond their mountains changed, with radios, trucks, and airplanes connecting distant places, the Subanen's inner world remained rooted in a rhythm older than any government decree. They could not always fight the loss of land or the dominance of outsiders, but they could protect the soul of their people. And in that quiet defiance lay their strength. The Subanen had no written books or archives. Their history lived in memory, in chants, in oral stories passed from elder to child. During the mid-20th century, this tradition became even more crucial, for without it, their identity would vanish under the weight of change. Elders would sit by the fire, weaving the tale of the four brothers, their migration from Cotabato, their choice to preserve the spirits, and their spread across the peninsula. Every retelling was an act of survival, ensuring that even if land was lost, the story would remain. In times of despair, when a valley was taken by settlers or a ritual ground destroyed by logging, elders reminded their people. Our ancestors left the Pulangi, but they did not die. They walked into the mountains, and here we are. As long as we walk, we endure. This passing of memory bound the people together like threads in a woven mat. It was slow, silent, and unseen by outsiders, but it was resistance nonetheless. Through memory, the Subanen resisted erasure. They endured storms of history, clinging to the story that had carried them for centuries. Thus, even without weapons or armies, they fought with chants, with rituals, and with memory strong enough to outlast empires. By the late 20th century, the Zamboanga Peninsula was no longer a quiet refuge. National policies encouraged migration to Mindanao, bringing waves of settlers from Luzon and Visayas into Subanen lands. Forests were cleared at an unprecedented rate, rivers diverted for irrigation, and fertile valleys fenced off for commercial plantations. The Subanen, whose identity was tied to the land and water, found themselves pushed further into the uplands, cut off from areas they had cultivated for generations. Government surveys claimed the land as vacant or underutilized, ignoring centuries of Subanen stewardship. Missionaries had built schools and churches, promising progress. Yet these institutions often undermined traditional knowledge, branding rituals and oral histories as primitive. Young Subanen, exposed to new education systems, sometimes questioned their elders' teachings, creating generational tension. The people faced a dual challenge: protecting their lands from encroachment while safeguarding the culture that defined them. They could no longer live as they once had. Survival required adaptation. And yet, the memory of the four brothers, Tabunaway's line aligned with Islam, and Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo's exiled kin, reminded them that identity is not only shaped by place, but by faithfulness to ancestors. Amidst these pressures, the Subanen held tightly to the rivers and forests that had nurtured them, knowing that the pulse of the past still flowed through the present. In this era of rapid change, the Subanen's rituals, songs, and festivals became not just acts of spirituality, but symbols of resilience. The bucklog, performed at times of harvest or communal gatherings, reverberated with layers of meaning: gratitude, remembrance, and defiance. As drums echoed over valleys and gongs vibrated beneath the night sky, outsiders might have seen celebration, but the Subanen understood it as an assertion of survival. Elders meticulously preserved oral histories, recounting the story of the four brothers, the exodus from Cotabato, and the choices that forged their people. Children were taught to respect the rivers, the mountains, and the unseen spirits, so that every footstep on the land acknowledged the presence of ancestors. The Subanen's ability to retain their culture under intense external pressure was remarkable. Even as the world modernized around them, they maintained a distinct identity rooted in rivers, forests, and ancestral memory. Scholars later recognized that the Subanen had achieved what many indigenous groups could not. They survived without complete assimilation, preserving their rituals and language despite decades of displacement, education reform, and land encroachment. It was a testament to the wisdom of the three brothers who had walked away centuries earlier. To protect a people, sometimes one must leave the easy path and defend what cannot be replaced. The soul of a culture be why the closing decades of the 20th century, Subanen leaders began to strategize for survival in a world that was no longer their own. Communities organized councils, bringing together elders from Lapuyan, Pagadian, Sindangan, and other settlements. They discussed ways to document their oral histories, defend ancestral lands, and maintain their rituals in the face of modernization. Some elders learned to write in both local and national languages, recording genealogies and chants for future generations. Others traveled to distant towns and cities to advocate for Subanen rights, negotiating with government officials and settlers alike. The Subanen knew that survival required more than isolation. It required careful engagement without sacrificing identity. Through these efforts, they built a network of solidarity, connecting the descendants of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, while maintaining awareness of Tabunaway's descendants in Maguindanao, kin who had chosen a different path, but shared the same river of origin. In the midst of environmental destruction, political change, and social pressures, the Subanen prepared to pass the torch to the next generation, a generation that would carry both the memory of exile and the resilience of centuries-old traditions. They stood on the threshold of the modern era, mindful that history had shaped them, but that the future would be theirs to safeguard. As the 21st century dawned, the Subanen faced a world vastly different from the rivers and mountains of their ancestors. Roads now cut across once isolated valleys, cell towers, and internet networks reached into previously hidden settlements, and commercial agriculture and mining threatened the sacred lands. While technology brought access to education, medicine, and communication, it also introduced pressures that tested the Subanen identity. Young people, exposed to global media and urban culture, often questioned the relevance of traditional rituals, wondering if the old ways held meaning in a modern world. Yet, amidst these challenges, the Subanen's connection to memory and rivers remained unbroken. From the highlands of Lakewood to the lowlands of Pagadian, elders continued to perform the bucklog, ensuring that the sound of gongs and drums resonated across generations. Rituals were no longer only spiritual ceremonies. They had become acts of cultural affirmation. Every platform raised, every song sung, was a reminder that the rivers carried not only water, but also the breath of the ancestors. In a time when land titles could be contested and the forces of globalization threatened traditional life, these ceremonies acted as anchors, keeping the community rooted in their identity. The story of the four brothers, of Tabunaway who embraced Islam, and Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo who chose the mountains, remains central. A narrative that explained both kinship with Muslim Mindanao and the distinct path of the Subanen. Recognizing the need to engage with modern systems while preserving their heritage, Subanen communities began initiatives for cultural education. Schools in Subanen settlements introduced programs teaching both national curricula and local history, language, and rituals. Children learned to read and write in their own dialect, while also learning about the exodus of their ancestors, the importance of rivers, and the songs that carried centuries of memory. Elders collaborated with local universities and cultural organizations to document chants, genealogies, and oral epics. This documentation was not merely academic, it was survival. By recording their heritage, the Subanen ensured that even as modernity altered their surroundings, the essence of their culture would remain intact. At the same time, they engaged with legal frameworks to defend ancestral lands, challenging encroachment and advocating for recognition of their rights. This dual approach, blending tradition with strategic adaptation, reflected the lessons of the past. Just as Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo had chosen to walk away from Cotabato to preserve their way of life, today's Subanen balanced adaptation with fidelity to memory, ensuring that the choices of their ancestors were not forgotten, but lived anew in contemporary contexts. Today, rivers remain central to Subanen identity. From the Pulangi tributaries to the streams of Zamboanga, water carries history as much as it carries life. In rituals and everyday life, the Subanen continue to honor the ancestors who once walked from Cotabato to the mountains, respecting the spirits that dwell in flowing water, rocks, and forests. The names of the four brothers are remembered not only in chants, but in stories told to children, teaching lessons about loyalty, courage, and survival. Tabunaway's legacy persists among the noble families of Maguindanao, while the rivers of the peninsula continue to nurture the descendants of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. Even in a world of smartphones, schools, and city migration, the Subanen understand that the rivers are more than geography. They are living memory. Every drop carries whispers of the past, echoing the decisions, sacrifices, and journeys of those who came before. Through these waters, the Subanen see themselves connected not only to one another, but to a continuum that stretches back centuries, binding the past to the present and guiding them toward the future. The story of the four brothers, once a tale of separation, has become the enduring thread that sustains an entire people, proving that memory, like a river, flows onward, shaping every generation it touches. In the 21st century, the Subanen have navigated a delicate balance between tradition and modernity. Many still reside in their ancestral lands along rivers, in valleys, and in the uplands of the Zamboanga Peninsula, maintaining ties to the natural world that has shaped their identity for centuries. Yet education, migration, and globalization have introduced new dynamics. Some Subanen have moved to urban centers like Pagadian, Dipolog, and Zamboanga City, seeking employment, higher education, and modern conveniences. Here, they interact with other cultural groups and religions, creating a complex tapestry of identity negotiation. Despite these changes, the bond to rivers, forests, and ancestral memory remains unbroken. Families continue to perform rituals like the bucklog, while elders recount the story of the four brothers to instill cultural pride and a sense of belonging in the younger generation. The narrative of Tabunaway, Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo serves not just as history, but as a guide for ethical living, community solidarity, and resilience in the face of change. Modern Subanen communities often merge ancient practices with contemporary life. Children may attend school in the morning and join in ritual preparations in the evening, while technology is used to document chants, genealogies, and oral histories for future preservation. One of the most pressing issues for contemporary Subanen communities is the defense of ancestral lands. Despite government recognition of indigenous rights, legal battles continue to arise against mining companies, commercial plantations, and urban development encroaching on traditional territories. In these conflicts, elders and community leaders often serve as both advocates and historians, using genealogical records and oral traditions to prove centuries of occupancy and stewardship. Rivers, long central to Subanen life, are also focal points of contention. Water diversion for irrigation, pollution from agriculture and industry, and dam projects threaten the ecological balance that has sustained their communities. At the same time, some Subanen have learned to leverage modern legal and political systems, forming cooperatives, cultural councils, and advocacy groups that bridge ancestral knowledge with contemporary governance. This dual approach, respecting ancient rituals while engaging with modern structures, exemplifies the enduring resilience of a people whose survival has always depended on adaptation without losing identity. Through these struggles, the Subanen reaffirm the lessons of their ancestors, that survival is not only physical but spiritual, and that loyalty to one's history is a form of strength as crucial as any weapon. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in Subanen culture and traditions. Cultural festivals, workshops, and research projects aim to revive and promote ancestral knowledge, from ritual dances and chants to traditional crafts and storytelling. The bucklog ritual, in particular, has gained recognition as a cultural treasure, drawing visitors and scholars eager to witness its intricate dances, music, and ceremonial significance. Subanen elders lead these events, instructing youth in the proper performance of rituals, the significance of ancestral offerings, and the songs that have preserved memory across centuries. Schools in Subanen areas often integrate cultural education into the curriculum, ensuring that children understand both their local history and the broader national context. Simultaneously, modern media and technology serve as tools to preserve these traditions. Recordings of chants, videos of rituals, and digital genealogies ensure that even those who live far from ancestral lands remain connected to their heritage. The story of the four brothers remains central in these efforts, a narrative that explains not only the origin of the Subanen, but also the enduring choice to preserve identity, even in the face of external pressures. Through cultural revival and continuity, the Subanen demonstrate that their rivers are not merely bodies of water, but lifelines of memory, identity, and ancestral wisdom, flowing through generations and sustaining the heart of a people. The Bucklog is not merely a ritual. It is the heartbeat of the Subanen people, a living testament to the choices and journeys of their ancestors. Its origins trace back centuries to the time when Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo led their followers into the mountains after leaving Cotabato. In the uplands of Lapuyan, Cumalarang, and Lakewood, these ancestors established the Bucklog as a thanksgiving to the spirits of the land, rivers, and forests. Unlike rituals imposed by foreign faiths, the Bucklog was a direct dialogue with the unseen world, a conversation with the Dawada, the spirits who guided and protected the community. During the ceremony, a platform of wood, elevated above the ground, is constructed as the stage for dances and offerings. The platform itself is symbolic, representing the connection between earth and sky, human and spirit. Drums, gongs, and bamboo percussion instruments provide the rhythm, echoing through valleys as if to summon the ancestors themselves. The chants are intricate and carry meanings layered in history, mythology, and social guidance. Elders teach these songs orally, ensuring that the performance is faithful to the memory of the ancestors. Each Bucklog, whether performed during harvest, healing, or communal gatherings, is thus an embodiment of identity, survival, and spiritual continuity. The preparation for a Bucklog is as significant as the ceremony itself. Weeks or even months in advance, community members gather to prepare the platform, the instruments, and the offerings. The platform is made of hardwood and bamboo, raised several feet above the ground, capable of resonating with the movements of dancers. Offerings are carefully selected: chickens, rice, and native fruits, symbolizing gratitude for abundance and the spirit's favor. On the day of the ritual, men and women participate with precise movements, stamping the platform to produce rhythms that imitate the heartbeat of the earth. The gongs vibrate in harmony, signaling to the unseen that the community is ready to commune with them. Songs are performed in call and response patterns, with elders guiding younger participants. Each stanza carries messages, honoring the ancestors, acknowledging the rivers and forests, and recounting the story of the four brothers. The performance is not entertainment. It is sacred, a ceremony binding generations together. Even young children, observing and gradually participating, learn through immersion, understanding not only the dance, but the cosmology it conveys. Through this structure, the Bucklog preserves collective memory, teaching values of cooperation, respect for nature, and fidelity to tradition in a way that written text cannot replicate. The Bucklog is both cultural and spiritual, a living bridge between the past and present. Anthropologists and historians have studied it as a unique manifestation of indigenous Philippine ritual, but for the Subanen, it is more than an artifact. It is a vessel of ancestral wisdom. It enforces social cohesion, reminding communities of their interdependence, the importance of collective labor, and the moral codes that have sustained them for centuries. Spiritually, it serves as a medium for communication with the Dawada, ensuring that human actions remain in harmony with nature. The ritual embodies the choices of the three brothers who chose exile over assimilation. It celebrates survival, resilience, and the determination to preserve identity against all odds. Even as modernity encroaches, with schools, roads, and technology, the Bucklog continues to anchor the Subanen to their history. For every drumbeat, every chant, and every rhythmic stomp on the elevated platform, there's a reminder that rivers, forests, and human memory are inseparable. The Bucklog, therefore, is not only a ritual of thanksgiving, it is the living embodiment of a people's journey, the echo of ancestors' footsteps, and the enduring testament to the spirit of survival that has defined the Subanen for centuries. Subanen governance is deeply rooted in tradition, balancing social order with respect for ancestral practices. At the heart of each community stands the Datu, a leader who carries the responsibility of ensuring justice, harmony, and survival. The Datu is not an autocrat. He is a mediator and guide, chosen for wisdom, experience, and adherence to ancestral customs rather than inheritance alone. Assisting him is a council of elders who bring knowledge of history, rituals, and the land. These councils deliberate on matters of dispute, land boundaries, and communal labor, often sitting under the shade of ancient trees by the rivers or in communal houses that serve as both court and meeting place. Decisions are made collectively, reflecting the principle that survival and prosperity depend on cooperation and respect for the wisdom of the past. This system, centuries old, mirrors the choices of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. When the three brothers departed from Cotabato, they ensured that leadership remained connected to consensus, ritual, and kinship rather than foreign imposition. Through these governance structures, the Subanen maintained social cohesion, preserve cultural memory, and ensure that the community's voice remains stronger than any external threat. Subanen society is intricately organized around kinship and clans. Extended families form the backbone of daily life, and each clan traces its lineage back to one of the three brothers. Dumalandalan's descendants, predominantly in Lapuyan and Lakewood, Gumabonabon's lineage in Pagadian and Sibigay, and Mamulo's line in Sindangan, Dipolog, and Katapunan, maintain oral genealogies that span centuries. These genealogies are crucial, not only for cultural identity, but also for resolving disputes, allocating communal land, and preserving historical memory. Marriage within and between clans is carefully regulated, ensuring alliances while preventing conflicts. Elders play a central role in advising youth on appropriate marriages, the responsibilities of family life, and the continuation of ancestral duties. Through kinship, social norms are transmitted, and values such as cooperation, respect for nature, and reverence for the past are embedded in everyday life. Even in modern times, when some members migrate to urban areas for work or education, they remain connected to their clan, returning for festivals, rituals, and council meetings. This enduring network of kinship ensures that the community retains cohesion despite geographical dispersion, preserving the ancestral heritage of the four brothers across generations. The Subanen have long demonstrated the capacity to adapt while preserving core values. In governance and social structure, they integrate modern education, legal knowledge, and political engagement with traditional practices. Some Datu now hold formal positions in local government, serving as liaisons between the community and municipal authorities. Councils of elders often collaborate with NGOs and cultural agencies to protect ancestral lands, document oral histories, and advocate for sustainable development. Yet, even with this integration, traditional norms remain central. Rituals, decision-making processes, and kinship networks continue to guide behavior, ensuring that the community remains grounded in its cultural memory. This balance mirrors the choice of the three brothers centuries earlier. One could adapt without abandoning identity, survive without surrendering ancestral knowledge. In every council meeting, wedding, or harvest festival, the Subanen exercise a governance model that is both ancient and dynamic, blending the wisdom of ancestors with the demands of contemporary life. In doing so, they reaffirm the enduring lesson of the four brothers. that culture, memory, and community are as vital to survival as rivers, forests, and mountains. Language is the lifeblood of memory, and for the Subanen, their dialects are vessels carrying centuries of stories, rituals, and genealogies. Historically, the Subanen transmitted knowledge orally, with elders teaching the young through chants, epic narratives, and everyday conversation. Each word held meaning beyond communication. It was a link to the ancestors, a record of journeys, rituals, and moral codes. In the modern era, as formal education systems and national languages expanded, the Subanen faced the challenge of preserving their linguistic heritage. Schools, taught in Filipino and English, risked marginalizing native dialects. Recognizing this, communities and cultural organizations initiated programs to document and teach the Subanen language. Textbooks were developed, teachers trained, and curricula designed to integrate literacy in the native tongue alongside national subjects. Children learned to read and write in Subanen, transcribing chants, genealogies, and ritual instructions for posterity. Beyond mere instruction, these programs emphasize the importance of language as identity, a reminder that words themselves are carriers of memory. Through preserving their dialects, the Subanen ensured that the story of the four brothers, the travels of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, and the rituals of the Bucklog remained intelligible and meaningful to generations far removed from the Pulangi River. Education among the Subanen today is a blend of modern schooling and indigenous knowledge. Children attend primary and secondary schools where they learn mathematics, science, and literature, while evenings and weekends are often reserved for lessons in history, rituals, and practical skills rooted in traditional life. Elders teach fishing, farming, and forest stewardship alongside the spiritual significance of rivers, mountains, and trees. Cultural centers in Subanen communities now act as classrooms for language preservation, crafts, and performing arts. The integration of these educational approaches is vital for the survival of identity. By learning both the skills necessary to navigate the modern world and the values rooted in ancestral memory, the Subanen ensure that youth remain connected to their heritage while engaging effectively with contemporary society. Students participate in ritual preparation, song transcription, and storytelling exercises, learning to view knowledge as holistic, where language, environment, spirituality, and social responsibility are inseparable. In this way, education becomes not just a path to individual success, but a mechanism to sustain collective memory, community cohesion, and cultural resilience across generations. The digital age has presented both a challenge and an opportunity for Subanen language preservation. While globalization threatens the dominance of local dialects, technology enables the documentation and dissemination of linguistic and cultural knowledge like never before. Communities now record chants, rituals, genealogies, and stories using audio and video, creating digital archives accessible to future generations. Subanen youth, trained in computer literacy, participate actively in these projects, ensuring that modern tools serve traditional goals. Mobile apps, social media, and online platforms allow diaspora members to stay connected to ancestral practices, translating oral histories into written and visual formats without losing nuance. These efforts do more than preserve language. They strengthen identity, allowing Subanen descendants in urban centers or abroad to remain connected to their heritage. The combined use of modern tools and traditional teaching ensures that the story of the four brothers, the journeys from Cotabato, and the enduring cultural practices of the Subanen continue to resonate. Through this synthesis of old and new, the Subanen demonstrate that language is not static. It is a living river, carrying history, memory, and identity into the future. Festivals among the Subanen are far more than celebrations. They're the threads that weave the social and spiritual fabric of the community. Central among these is the bucklog, a ritual that functions both as a Thanksgiving ceremony and a reaffirmation of collective identity. In addition to the bucklog, seasonal festivals mark important events such as harvests, river blessings, and rites of passage. These gatherings serve as opportunities to strengthen kinship bonds, transmit oral histories, and engage the younger generation in cultural practices. In Lapuyan, Pagadian, and Sindangan, families prepare weeks in advance, constructing elevated platforms for dancing, practicing chants, and coordinating offerings. These festivals require cooperation across households and clans, reinforcing a sense of shared responsibility. Participation is inclusive. Elders instruct, adults manage logistics, and children observe, gradually absorbing the complex interplay of ritual, music, and community governance. Through festivals, the Subanens celebrate survival, prosperity, and spiritual communion with the spirits of land and water. They also use these occasions to narrate the journey of the four brothers, reminding everyone that their identity is tied to choices made centuries ago, choices that shaped not only individual lives, but the destiny of an entire people. Beyond formal festivals, community life among the Subanen is governed by long-standing social norms that emphasize cooperation, mutual aid, and respect for the environment. Farming, hunting, and fishing are organized collectively, ensuring equitable distribution and sustainability. The daily routines of the Subanen are interwoven with ritual awareness. Even mundane tasks, such as planting or river harvesting, are preceded by prayers and offerings to honor spirits and ancestors. Elders serve as teachers, guiding the youth in agricultural methods, forest preservation, and ethical conduct, while also transmitting genealogical knowledge and ancestral narratives. Gender roles, though traditional, are dynamic, allowing women to participate actively in ritual preparations, household governance, and community decision-making. The community's social structure is reinforced through kinship networks, clan responsibilities, and council deliberations led by the Datu. Disputes over land, water, or family issues are resolved collectively, with consensus favored over coercion. These structures ensure that cultural memory remains alive in every aspect of daily life, creating a social ecosystem where history, spirituality, and survival are inseparable. A defining feature of Subanen community life is the intergenerational transmission of culture. Elders take primary responsibility for teaching the younger generation about ancestral rituals, genealogies, and the proper conduct of community life. Children participate in festivals, assist in platform construction, and learn chants and dances by immersion. Storytelling sessions at night recount the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, as well as the choices of Tabunaway, providing moral guidance and a sense of belonging. These narratives serve as living archives, encoding both history and values into daily practice. Oral transmission is complemented in the modern era by documentation. Recordings, written texts, and digital media ensure that even as communities disperse or youth migrate to urban areas, the memory of the four brothers, the rivers, and the spirits remains accessible. By integrating ritual practice, social cohesion, and education, the Subanen sustain a culture that adapts to contemporary challenges while remaining firmly anchored in the wisdom of their ancestors. Festivals and community life, therefore, are not merely cultural expressions. They're the vessels through which identity, memory, and resilience flow from one generation to the next, preserving the essence of the Subanen people for centuries to come. Subanen arts and crafts are an extension of their identity, reflecting both aesthetic sensibilities and cultural memory. Among the most prominent forms is weaving, particularly in the creation of intricate textiles used for clothing, ritual ceremonies, and household purposes. Weaving is traditionally a communal activity, with women teaching younger generations the complex patterns, motifs, and symbolism embedded in each piece. The designs are rarely purely decorative. Each pattern conveys stories of ancestry, rivers, and spiritual belief. Geometric patterns may symbolize mountains or river currents, while specific color combinations can signify lineage, social status, or ritual intent. For example, the weaving of ritual garments for the bucklog involves careful attention to detail, ensuring that the sacred symbols are properly represented. This craft is not only artistic, but also educational, transmitting historical knowledge and spiritual awareness alongside practical skill. Through weaving, the Subanen preserve the legacy of their ancestors, ensuring that even in an era of mass-produced textiles, their cultural narratives remain visible and tangible, woven into every thread that passes through the loom. Woodcraft is another vital expression of Subanen artistry, closely tied to spiritual practice and daily life. Carved wooden objects include ritual implements, household tools, and decorative items, each imbued with cultural significance. Platforms for the bucklog, for instance, are meticulously constructed to resonate under dancers' movements, with carvings representing spirits, rivers, and ancestral figures. Smaller carved objects, such as masks or ceremonial figures, serve as mediators between humans and the unseen world, symbolically bridging the present and the ancestral past. These crafts are often taught by elders to apprentices within the community, combining practical skills with cultural instruction. Wood selection, carving techniques, and symbolic representation are carefully passed down, ensuring fidelity to tradition. The act of carving itself is a ritual, invoking protection, guidance, and blessings from the spirits. Through these arts, the Subanen maintain an intimate connection to the natural environment, demonstrating reverence for trees, rivers, and mountains as both physical resources and spiritual presences. The continuity of woodcraft, like weaving, embodies the Subanen philosophy that culture is inseparable from memory, environment, and spiritual responsibility. Music and dance are the living heartbeat of Subanen culture, inseparable from rituals, festivals, and communal life. Instruments such as gongs, bamboo flutes, and percussion devices are crafted with care and played during ceremonies that reinforce community bonds and ancestral memory. The rhythmic patterns of the bucklog platform dances are meticulously transmitted across generations, each movement and sound encoding spiritual and historical meaning. Oral arts, including chants, epic narratives, and genealogical recitations, accompany these performances, ensuring that stories of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, as well as the choices of Tabunaway, are perpetually remembered. Beyond ritual contexts, music and dance provide entertainment, moral instruction, and social cohesion, integrating the community in shared experiences. Even in the modern era, Subanen youth are taught these arts in both formal and informal settings, ensuring that despite technological and cultural pressures, these traditions remain vibrant. Together with weaving and woodcraft, music and dance form a triad of cultural expression, linking past, present, and future. Each artistic form is a vessel for identity, ensuring that Subanen heritage is not static but alive, resonant, and continuously nurtured across generations. The spiritual life of the Subanen is intricately intertwined with the natural world, echoing the choices of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, who, centuries ago, left Cotabato to preserve their ancestral traditions. For the Subanen, every river, tree, mountain, and valley is imbued with life and spirit. The Dawata, or ancestral spirits, inhabit these places, guiding, protecting, and sometimes challenging the community. Spirituality is not abstract. It is a lived experience embedded in daily life. Offerings accompany planting, harvesting, hunting, and river fishing, ensuring that human actions remain in harmony with the natural and supernatural realms. Rituals such as the bucklog serve as a concentrated expression of these beliefs, but even outside formal ceremonies, reverence for spirits shapes behavior. Social norms, ethical conduct, and environmental stewardship are all influenced by spiritual obligations. To violate this sacred order by overharvesting, disrespecting elders, or neglecting rituals is not merely a social infraction, but a spiritual imbalance that can affect the entire community. Through this framework, the Subanen integrate morality, ecology, and cultural memory, creating a worldview where survival, spirituality, and social cohesion are inseparable. Central to the practice of Subanen spirituality are the ritual specialists, known as Balian or shamans. These individuals serve as intermediaries between humans and the spirits, leading ceremonies, offering guidance, and healing illnesses believed to stem from spiritual imbalance. The Balian inherit their knowledge through apprenticeship, learning chants, rituals, and medicinal practices from elders who have preserved the oral traditions over centuries. Their role extends beyond ritual performance. They act as cultural custodians, ensuring the continuity of the community's moral, ecological, and historical understanding. In the context of the bucklog, the Balian direct the offerings, chants, and dances, coordinating with elders and community members to maintain ritual accuracy. They are often called upon in moments of crisis, drought, disease, or social conflict to restore harmony and balance. Through their work, the Subanen maintain a direct connection to ancestral memory, reinforcing the lessons passed down from the time of the Four Brothers. Even as modernization introduces new beliefs and challenges, the Balian remain pivotal in sustaining the community's spiritual life and its intergenerational transmission of knowledge. Despite centuries of interaction with Islam, Christianity, and modern state institutions, the Subanen have retained the core of their ancestral spirituality while selectively integrating external elements. In regions where contact with Muslim or Christian communities is intense, some practices have adapted, blending rituals to coexist peacefully with neighboring faiths. For example, certain blessings or offerings may be performed alongside prayers from a mosque or church, demonstrating flexibility without erasing identity. Yet, the essence of Subanen belief remains. Humans are custodians of the land, responsible to spirits, ancestors, and the cycles of nature. Festivals, chants, and rituals continue to affirm this worldview, reinforcing community cohesion and moral responsibility. Adaptation has allowed the Subanen to survive, negotiate land rights, and maintain cultural integrity in a rapidly changing world. The spiritual framework, anchored in rivers, forests, and mountains, continues to shape ethics, social life, and identity. In essence, Subanen religion is both a lens for understanding the past and a tool for navigating the present, connecting modern communities to the enduring wisdom of their ancestors. The choices made by the three brothers centuries ago resonate in every ritual, chant, and act of reverence, sustaining a living, dynamic spirituality that remains central to Subanen life. Education among the Subanen today is a blend of modern schooling and indigenous knowledge. Children attend primary and secondary schools where they learn mathematics, science, and literature, while evenings and weekends are often reserved for lessons in history, rituals, and practical skills rooted in traditional life. Elders teach fishing, farming, and forest stewardship alongside the spiritual significance of rivers, mountains, and trees. Cultural centers and Subanen communities now act as classrooms for language preservation, crafts, and performing arts. The integration of these educational approaches is vital for the survival of identity. By learning both the skills necessary to navigate the modern world and the values rooted in ancestral memory, the Subanen ensure that youth remain connected to their heritage while engaging effectively with contemporary society. Students participate in ritual preparation, song transcription, and storytelling exercises, learning to view knowledge as holistic, where language, environment, spirituality, and social responsibility are inseparable. In this way, education becomes not just a path to individual success, but a mechanism to sustain collective memory, community cohesion, and cultural resilience across generations. The digital age has presented both a challenge and an opportunity for Subanen language preservation. While globalization threatens the dominance of local dialects, technology enables the documentation and dissemination of linguistic and cultural knowledge like never before. Communities now record chants, rituals, genealogies, and stories using audio and video, creating digital archives accessible to future generations. Subanen youth, trained in computer literacy, participate actively in these projects, ensuring that modern tools serve traditional goals. Mobile apps, social media, and online platforms allow diaspora members to stay connected to ancestral practices, translating oral histories into written and visual formats without losing nuance. These efforts do more than preserve language. They strengthen identity, allowing Subanen descendants in urban centers or abroad to remain connected to their heritage. The combined use of modern tools and traditional teaching ensures that the story of the four brothers, the journeys from Cotabato, and the enduring cultural practices of the Subanen continue to resonate. Through this synthesis of old and new, the Subanen demonstrate that language is not static. It is a living river, carrying history, memory, and identity into the future. Festivals among the Subanen are far more than celebrations. They're the threads that weave the social and spiritual fabric of the community. Central among these is the bucklog, a ritual that functions both as a Thanksgiving ceremony and a reaffirmation of collective identity. In addition to the bucklog, seasonal festivals mark important events such as harvests, river blessings, and rites of passage. These gatherings serve as opportunities to strengthen kinship bonds, transmit oral histories, and engage the younger generation in cultural practices. In Lapuyan, Pagadian, and Sindangan, families prepare weeks in advance, constructing elevated platforms for dancing, practicing chants, and coordinating offerings. These festivals require cooperation across households and clans, reinforcing a sense of shared responsibility. Participation is inclusive. Elders instruct, adults manage logistics, and children observe, gradually absorbing the complex interplay of ritual, music, and community governance. Through festivals, the Subanen celebrate survival, prosperity, and spiritual communion with the spirits of land and water. They also use these occasions to narrate the journey of the four brothers, reminding everyone that their identity is tied to choices made centuries ago, choices that shaped not only individual lives, but the destiny of an entire people. Beyond formal festivals, community life among the Subanen is governed by long-standing social norms that emphasize cooperation, mutual aid, and respect for the environment. Farming, hunting, and fishing are organized collectively, ensuring equitable distribution and sustainability. The daily routines of the Subanen are interwoven with ritual awareness. Even mundane tasks, such as planting or river harvesting, are preceded by prayers and offerings to honor spirits and ancestors. Elders serve as teachers, guiding the youth in agricultural methods, forest preservation, and ethical conduct, while also transmitting genealogical knowledge and ancestral narratives. Gender roles, though traditional, are dynamic, allowing women to participate actively in ritual preparations, household governance, and community decision-making. The community's social structure is reinforced through kinship networks, clan responsibilities, and council deliberations led by the datu. Disputes over land, water, or family issues are resolved collectively, with consensus favored over coercion. These structures ensure that cultural memory remains alive in every aspect of daily life, creating a social ecosystem where history, spirituality, and survival are inseparable. A defining feature of Subanen community life is the intergenerational transmission of culture. Elders take primary responsibility for teaching the younger generation about ancestral rituals, genealogies, and the proper conduct of community life. Children participate in festivals, assist in platform construction, and learn chants and dances by immersion. Storytelling sessions at night recount the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, as well as the choices of Tabunaway, providing moral guidance and a sense of belonging. These narratives serve as living archives, encoding both history and values into daily practice. Oral transmission is complemented in the modern era by documentation, recordings, written texts, and digital media ensure that even as communities disperse or youth migrate to urban areas, the memory of the four brothers, the rivers, and the spirits remains accessible. By integrating ritual practice, social cohesion, and education, the Subanen sustain a culture that adapts to contemporary challenges while remaining firmly anchored in the wisdom of their ancestors. Festivals and community life, therefore, are not merely cultural expressions. They're the vessels through which identity, memory, and resilience flow from one generation to the next, preserving the essence of the Subanen people for centuries to come. Subanen arts and crafts are an extension of their identity, reflecting both aesthetic sensibilities and cultural memory. Among the most prominent forms is weaving, particularly in the creation of intricate textiles used for clothing, ritual ceremonies, and household purposes. Weaving is traditionally a communal activity, with women teaching younger generations the complex patterns, motifs, and symbolism embedded in each piece. The designs are rarely purely decorative. Each pattern conveys stories of ancestry, rivers, and spiritual belief. Geometric patterns may symbolize mountains or river currents, while specific color combinations can signify lineage, social status, or ritual intent. For example, the weaving of ritual garments for the bucklog involves careful attention to detail, ensuring that the sacred symbols are properly represented. This craft is not only artistic but also educational, transmitting historical knowledge and spiritual awareness alongside practical skill. Through weaving, the Subanen preserve the legacy of their ancestors, ensuring that even in an era of mass-produced textiles, their cultural narratives remain visible and tangible, woven into every thread that passes through the loom. Woodcraft is another vital expression of Subanen artistry, closely tied to spiritual practice and daily life. Carved wooden objects include ritual implements, household tools, and decorative items, each imbued with cultural significance. Platforms for the bucklog, for instance, are meticulously constructed to resonate under dancers' movements, with carvings representing spirits, rivers, and ancestral figures. Smaller carved objects, such as masks or ceremonial figures, serve as mediators between humans and the unseen world, symbolically bridging the present and the ancestral past. These crafts are often taught by elders to apprentices within the community, combining practical skills with cultural instruction. Wood selection, carving techniques, and symbolic representation are carefully passed down, ensuring fidelity to tradition. The act of carving itself is a ritual, invoking protection, guidance, and blessings from the spirits. Through these arts, the Subanen maintain an intimate connection to the natural environment, demonstrating reverence for trees, rivers, and mountains as both physical resources and spiritual presences. The continuity of woodcraft, like weaving, embodies the Subanen philosophy that culture is inseparable from memory, environment, and spiritual responsibility. Music and dance are the living heartbeat of Subanen culture, inseparable from rituals, festivals, and communal life. Instruments such as gongs, bamboo flutes, and percussion devices are crafted with care and played during ceremonies that reinforce community bonds and ancestral memory. The rhythmic patterns of the bucklog platform dances are meticulously transmitted across generations, each movement and sound encoding spiritual and historical meaning. Oral arts, including chants, epic narratives, and genealogical recitations, accompany these performances, ensuring that stories of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, as well as the choices of Tabunaway, are perpetually remembered. Beyond ritual contexts, music and dance provide entertainment, moral instruction, and social cohesion, integrating the community in shared experiences. Even in the modern era, Subanen youth are taught these arts in both formal and informal settings, ensuring that despite technological and cultural pressures, these traditions remain vibrant. Together with weaving and woodcraft, music and dance form a triad of cultural expression, linking past, present, and future. Each artistic form is a vessel for identity, ensuring that Subanen heritage is not static but alive, resonant, and continuously nurtured across generations. The spiritual life of the Subanen is intricately intertwined with the natural world, echoing the choices of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, who, centuries ago, left Cotabato to preserve their ancestral traditions. For the Subanen, every river, tree, mountain, and valley is imbued with life and spirit. The Dawada, or ancestral spirits, inhabit these places, guiding, protecting, and sometimes challenging the community. Spirituality is not abstract. It is a lived experience embedded in daily life. Offerings accompany planting, harvesting, hunting, and river fishing, ensuring that human actions remain in harmony with the natural and supernatural realms. Rituals such as the bucklog serve as a concentrated expression of these beliefs, but even outside formal ceremonies, reverence for spirits shapes behavior. Social norms, ethical conduct, and environmental stewardship are all influenced by spiritual obligations. To violate this sacred order by over-harvesting, disrespecting elders, or neglecting rituals is not merely a social infraction, but a spiritual imbalance that can affect the entire community. Through this framework, the Subanen integrate morality, ecology, and cultural memory, creating a worldview where survival, spirituality, and social cohesion are inseparable. Central to the practice of Subanen spirituality are the ritual specialists, known as Balian or shamans. These individuals serve as intermediaries between humans and the spirits, leading ceremonies, offering guidance, and healing illnesses believed to stem from spiritual imbalance. The Balian inherit their knowledge through apprenticeship, learning chants, rituals, and medicinal practices from elders who have preserved the oral traditions over centuries. Their role extends beyond ritual performance. They act as cultural custodians, ensuring the continuity of the community's moral, ecological, and historical understanding. In the context of the Bucklog, the Balian direct the offerings, chants, and dances, coordinating with elders and community members to maintain ritual accuracy. They are often called upon in moments of crisis, drought, disease, or social conflict to restore harmony and balance. Through their work, the Subanen maintain a direct connection to ancestral memory, reinforcing the lessons passed down from the time of the Four Brothers. Even as modernization introduces new beliefs and challenges, the Balian remain pivotal in sustaining the community's spiritual life and its intergenerational transmission of knowledge. Despite centuries of interaction with Islam, Christianity, and modern state institutions, the Subanen have retained the core of their ancestral spirituality while selectively integrating external elements. In regions where contact with Muslim or Christian communities is intense, some practices have adapted, blending rituals to coexist peacefully with neighboring faiths. For example, certain blessings or offerings may be performed alongside prayers from a mosque or church, demonstrating flexibility without erasing identity. Yet, the essence of Subanen belief remains. Humans are custodians of the land, responsible to spirits, ancestors, and the cycles of nature. Festivals, chants, and rituals continue to affirm this worldview, reinforcing community cohesion and moral responsibility. Adaptation has allowed the Subanen to survive, negotiate land rights, and maintain cultural integrity in a rapidly changing world. The spiritual framework, anchored in rivers, forests, and mountains, continues to shape ethics, social life, and identity. In essence, Subanen religion is both a lens for understanding the past and a tool for navigating the present, connecting modern communities to the enduring wisdom of their ancestors. The choices made by the three brothers centuries ago resonate in every ritual, chant, and act of reverence, sustaining a living, dynamic spirituality that remains central to Subanen life. From the earliest days, the Subanen were not isolated. Their rivers and valleys facilitated interaction with neighboring groups. Archaeological evidence, including pottery shards, beads, and tools, indicates that Subanen ancestors traded with peoples from the Visayas, northern Mindanao, and even Borneo. Trade was conducted along rivers that served as natural highways, carrying goods like rice, forest products, and woven crafts. This interaction fostered mutual understanding and exchange of cultural practices. The Subanen learned techniques for agriculture, weaving, and metalwork from their neighbors while maintaining the rituals, chants, and social norms unique to their communities. Exchange was not merely material. It involved the sharing of ideas, stories, and beliefs, creating a dynamic environment where culture was continuously negotiated. Despite these contacts, the Subanen carefully preserved their distinct identity, ensuring that while they benefited from external influences, the core of their ancestral practices remained intact. This early engagement laid the foundation for centuries of adaptive coexistence with other cultural groups. Interaction with neighboring communities was not always harmonious. Throughout history, disputes over land, river access, and resources sometimes led to conflict, necessitating negotiation and diplomacy. The Subanen employed both ritual and social mechanisms to resolve disagreements, guided by the datu and councils of elders. Alliances were also formed through marriage, trade partnerships, and shared rituals, creating networks of interdependence across clans and regions. In some areas, interaction with Muslim communities was particularly complex. While Tabunaway's descendants had integrated into the Sultanate of Maguindanao, Subanen communities in the mountains maintained distinct beliefs and governance. Negotiations often involved mutual recognition of boundaries, shared responsibilities for river management, and agreements to respect spiritual sites. These interactions reinforced the Subanen skill in balancing autonomy with cooperation. By maintaining respectful relationships while preserving cultural integrity, the Subanen ensured that they could thrive alongside neighboring peoples without sacrificing their heritage. In contemporary times, interaction with neighboring communities has become increasingly multifaceted. Subanen engage in joint initiatives with municipal governments, NGOs, and non-Subanen communities to promote sustainable development, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. Cooperative projects include river cleanup campaigns, reforestation efforts, and cultural festivals that invite participation from diverse groups. These collaborations allow the Subanen to assert land and cultural rights while fostering understanding and peaceful coexistence. At the same time, the preservation of rituals, oral histories, and governance structures ensures that integration does not translate into assimilation. Children are educated both in mainstream schools and through community-led programs, learning to navigate urban life without losing touch with ancestral practices. Through trade, dialogue, alliances, and modern partnerships, the Subanen continue to negotiate their position in a multicultural landscape, echoing the lessons of their ancestors. Survival requires adaptability, strategic engagement, and a steadfast commitment to identity. Their rivers and mountains remain anchors, connecting them to history while guiding interactions in the present. For the Subanen, rivers are far more than watercourses. They're lifelines, spiritual centers, and historical archives. From the Pulangi tributaries to streams that wind through Lapuyan, Pagadian, and Sindangan, rivers sustain agriculture, fishing, and daily life while carrying the memory of generations. The community regards every river as imbued with ancestral presence, a concept rooted in the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, who led their people to distant valleys to preserve cultural and spiritual practices. Ritual offerings, chants, and ceremonies acknowledge rivers as living entities, capable of blessing or punishing depending on human behavior. In the past, rivers served as trade routes and migration paths. Today, they remain central to identity and survival. The Subanen understand that protecting rivers is not only an ecological necessity, but also a moral obligation. Pollution, deforestation, or overfishing is seen as a spiritual imbalance, echoing consequences that can affect entire communities. This worldview blends practical stewardship with ancestral reverence, ensuring that environmental care is embedded in cultural and spiritual norms. Environmental stewardship among the Subanen is deeply integrated into daily life. Agricultural practices, forest management, and fishing techniques reflect centuries of ecological knowledge. Crop rotation, sustainable hunting, and riverbank preservation are routine practices informed by ancestral wisdom. The community also enforces unwritten rules regarding resource usage, guided by elders and ritual specialists. Forested areas are protected not only for practical reasons, but as sacred spaces inhabited by spirits. Community councils resolve disputes over land and water use, balancing human needs with ecological sustainability. The ritual calendar, including bucklog ceremonies and river blessings, serves as a timetable for communal activities, ensuring that natural resources are used responsibly. By integrating environmental management with cultural and spiritual practices, the Subanen have maintained ecological balance over centuries, demonstrating that cultural preservation and environmental sustainability are inseparable. These practices also foster intergenerational learning, as youth observe, participate, and gradually internalize principles of stewardship alongside their understanding of ancestral heritage. In the contemporary era, environmental threats such as mining, deforestation, and climate change have challenged traditional Subanen practices. Rivers are diverted for commercial agriculture, forests are cleared for timber, and industrial pollution threatens biodiversity. In response, Subanen communities have taken proactive steps, combining traditional ecological knowledge with modern advocacy. Environmental councils, often led by elders and young leaders, document sacred sites, lobby local governments, and collaborate with NGOs to protect rivers and forests. Educational programs emphasize the spiritual and practical importance of river guardianship, teaching youth to respect water as both life source and cultural memory. Digital mapping, scientific research, and media campaigns complement ritual-based stewardship, ensuring that both traditional and modern tools are utilized for protection. This dual approach demonstrates the adaptive capacity of the Subanen. Survival depends on maintaining ancestral knowledge while engaging effectively with contemporary challenges. By upholding the sacred and practical dimensions of rivers, the Subanen continue the legacy of their ancestors, affirming that environmental stewardship is not a modern invention, but a continuation of centuries of lived philosophy, guiding communities toward ecological and cultural resilience. In recent decades, many Subanen families have migrated from ancestral lands to urban centers such as Zamboanga City, Dipolog, Pagadian, and even to Metro Manila and abroad. Economic necessity is the primary driver. Limited agricultural land, scarcity of employment, and the lure of education and modern amenities push youth and families to cities. Environmental pressures, including deforestation, river pollution, and climate change, further reduce the viability of traditional livelihoods in river valleys and uplands. Yet, migration is more than economic. It is also a social phenomenon, reflecting the Subanen's capacity to navigate changing circumstances while maintaining cultural ties. Families relocate with varying strategies. Some remain in close-knit urban enclaves to preserve community bonds, while others disperse for employment or study, relying on digital communication and periodic visits to ancestral villages to stay connected. Migration mirrors historical patterns, just as Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo once left Cotabato to preserve identity. Modern Subanen moved to new spaces to secure opportunity without abandoning heritage. Through this movement, the Subanen demonstrate resilience and adaptability, balancing the pressures of modern life with loyalty to ancestral memory, ensuring that cultural identity persists despite geographic displacement. Migration to cities presents unique challenges for the Subanen. Urban life often exposes youth to dominant cultures, mainstream education, and diverse religions, which can weaken traditional practices if unmonitored. However, Subanen communities have developed strategies to maintain cultural continuity. Urban enclaves organize cultural gatherings, celebrate rituals adapted for smaller spaces, and maintain networks of kinship to reinforce identity. Technology plays a crucial role. Social media, video calls, and digital archives allow migrants to stay connected to elders, follow ceremonial calendars, and participate in storytelling sessions from afar. Children and youth learn rituals and songs virtually or during periodic visits to ancestral lands, ensuring intergenerational transmission continues. Some urban Subanen also establish community centers or participate in cultural festivals that highlight their heritage, raising awareness among non-Subanen populations and reinforcing pride and identity. This urban adaptation ensures that migration does not sever the vital connection to rivers, mountains, and ancestral memory, transforming displacement into an opportunity for cultural reinforcement rather than erosion. Beyond national urban centers, Subanen communities have also established networks abroad, particularly in countries with Filipino migrant populations. These diaspora networks maintain identity through gatherings, festivals, and cultural education programs, connecting young generations to the story of the four brothers and ancestral practices. Digital communication facilitates cross-generational mentorship, allowing elders in the homeland to teach and guide diaspora youth. Genealogies, ritual instructions, and traditional songs are shared online, enabling dispersed communities to remain synchronized with ancestral knowledge. In doing so, the Subanen transformed diaspora into an extension of the homeland rather than a rupture. Identity becomes portable, sustained through memory, storytelling, and cultural practice, demonstrating remarkable adaptability. The narrative of the four brothers, the journey from Cotabato, and the rivers that shaped the Subanen continue to resonate, guiding both local and migrant populations in preserving heritage. Through urban migration and diaspora formation, the Subanen show that culture is resilient. It can travel, adapt, and thrive beyond ancestral valleys while maintaining the essence of identity, memory, and ancestral reverence. The Subanen have a long history of political negotiation, stretching back to the time when Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo led their people away from Cotabato. Their ancestors were acutely aware that survival and autonomy required both strategic alliances and vigilance against domination. In pre-colonial times, the Datu and councils of elders mediated interactions with neighboring communities and later with sultanates. With the arrival of Spanish colonizers in the 16th century, the Subanen retreated into the uplands to maintain independence, but they maintained knowledge of external governance structures, enabling negotiation when necessary. This foundation laid the groundwork for contemporary political engagement. The Subanen understand that self-determination is achieved not only through cultural preservation, but also through active participation in political and legal processes. By blending traditional authority with modern governance mechanisms, they ensure that their voice remains influential in matters affecting land, resources, and cultural integrity. This historical continuity of strategic engagement highlights the enduring lesson from the story of the four brothers. Survival depends on adapting to external realities without compromising ancestral identity. In contemporary Mindanao, Subanen communities actively participate in local and national politics. Elders and community leaders encourage members to vote, run for office, and engage in municipal and regional councils. Political involvement is often intertwined with cultural advocacy, as leaders seek to secure recognition for ancestral lands, protection of sacred sites, and funding for education and cultural programs. Legal frameworks such as the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, IPRA, provide opportunities to formalize these efforts, but they require sophisticated understanding of both statutory law and ancestral custom. Subanen leaders have formed alliances with NGOs, academic institutions, and government agencies to advance land rights, environmental protection, and cultural preservation. Participation also extends to intercommunity councils, where the Subanen negotiate with neighboring groups, municipal authorities, and provincial officials. Through these mechanisms, political engagement is not simply about power or representation. It is a continuation of the centuries-old practice of protecting autonomy, negotiating survival, and asserting identity in a complex social landscape. Advocacy among the Subanen extends beyond conventional politics into cultural and environmental domains. Campaigns to protect rivers, forests and sacred sites are often framed as both spiritual and legal responsibilities, reflecting the integrated worldview of the community. Cultural preservation projects, including documentation of rituals, language programs, and festivals, are supported by political action, ensuring that governance and culture reinforce one another. Youth participation is emphasized, creating a pipeline of informed citizens capable of advocating for community interests while upholding ancestral values. The story of the four brothers serves as a moral compass. It reminds advocates that negotiation, resilience, and fidelity to heritage are key to enduring success. By integrating traditional authority, legal literacy, and cultural advocacy, the Subanen exemplify a model of political engagement that is deeply rooted in history, yet responsive to contemporary challenges. Their efforts ensure that ancestral lands, spiritual practices, and collective memory remain protected, demonstrating that culture and politics are inseparable components of a resilient and thriving community. Traditional medicine among the Subanen is an essential part of community life, deeply intertwined with spiritual belief, ancestral knowledge, and environmental stewardship. The Subanen view health as a holistic concept encompassing physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Illness is often seen as a disruption in the balance between humans, the environment, and the spirits. Balian or ritual specialists play a central role in diagnosing and treating ailments, combining herbal remedies with ritual purification, chants, and offerings. Knowledge of medicinal plants is extensive, encompassing hundreds of species used for treating fever, wounds, digestive issues, and spiritual afflictions. Preparation methods vary from decoctions and poultices to inhalation of aromatic smoke or ceremonial consumption of sacred herbs. Treatment is always contextual, considering the patient's familial lineage, spiritual connections, and social circumstances. This approach ensures that medicine is not only about curing physical symptoms, but also restoring harmony with the natural and supernatural worlds. Historical continuity is evident. Just as the three brothers preserved spiritual and cultural integrity centuries ago, contemporary Subanen healers maintain practices that link health with ancestral memory, social order, and ecological responsibility. Modern healthcare services have gradually reached Subanen communities, providing access to clinics, hospitals, and trained medical professionals. Yet, integration with traditional medicine remains crucial. Subanen families often combine modern treatments with ancestral healing practices, seeking both symptomatic relief and spiritual balance. Ritual purification or herbal therapy may accompany vaccination, surgery, or pharmaceutical treatment, reflecting a syncretic approach that honors cultural identity while embracing beneficial advancements. Community workshops often bring together modern healthcare providers and Balian to exchange knowledge, improve sanitation, and ensure ethical treatment practices. Education on nutrition, disease prevention, and maternal care is enhanced by contextualizing these concepts within traditional beliefs, making them more accessible and culturally resonant. Through this integration, health initiatives achieve higher acceptance, participation, and effectiveness, demonstrating the Subanen's adaptability in maintaining ancestral practices while engaging with modernity. A defining characteristic of Subanen healthcare is the intergenerational transmission of knowledge. Elders teach younger members the identification, harvesting, and preparation of medicinal plants, as well as the spiritual rituals necessary for effective healing. This ensures that traditional medicine remains alive, even as youth pursue formal education or urban opportunities. Storytelling serves as both educational and moral reinforcement. conveying lessons about ethics, responsibility, and ecological stewardship alongside practical medicinal knowledge. Seasonal rituals, offerings, and healing ceremonies maintain community cohesion, reminding participants of their obligations to the spirits, the land, and one another. This holistic approach strengthens resilience, enabling communities to navigate health challenges while preserving cultural identity. By intertwining ancestral wisdom with practical care, the Subanen sustain a healthcare system that is not merely functional, but deeply reflective of history, spirituality, and communal values, echoing the enduring legacy of the four brothers and their vision of survival through balance, knowledge, and respect for life. Oral literature forms the backbone of Subanen cultural identity, linking generations through stories, chants, and epics that encode history, values, and spiritual knowledge. Long before written records were established, the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, as well as the leadership of Tabunaway, were transmitted orally. Elders, recognized for their wisdom and memory, recited genealogies and epic narratives that recounted battles, migrations, rituals, and encounters with neighboring peoples. These narratives were not simply entertainment. They were educational tools, conveying moral lessons, societal norms, and ecological ethics. Epic chants, performed during rituals such as the bucklog, incorporated elaborate rhythms, tonal variations, and gestures, creating a multisensory experience that ensured the story's retention across generations. The oral tradition maintained historical continuity in a fluid cultural landscape, enabling Subanen communities to preserve collective memory, assert identity, and transmit practical knowledge necessary for survival in both upland and riverine environments. Through these oral narratives, the Subanen maintained a living connection to the ancestral past, affirming that culture and history are inseparable from memory, performance, and communal participation. Subanen epic narratives follow intricate structures that blend mythology, historical events, and ethical instruction. Central characters, often drawn from ancestral history, embody ideals of bravery, wisdom, and loyalty, with the journeys of the four brothers serving as foundational motifs. Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo represent the preservation of ancestral knowledge and harmony with nature, while Tabunaway exemplifies engagement with external powers for strategic advantage. Themes of migration, adaptation, negotiation, and resilience recur throughout the epics, reflecting the real-life challenges of Subanen communities over centuries. Epics are performed in cycles, often lasting hours or even days, requiring skillful chanting, rhythmic accompaniment, and audience participation. The narratives are adaptive. Minor details may shift according to local events or environmental conditions, but the core lessons and historical memory remain intact. By blending didactic content with entertainment and ritual function, Subanen epics ensure that both historical consciousness and social values are preserved, reinforcing community cohesion and intergenerational learning. In contemporary Subanen society, the preservation of oral literature faces challenges from globalization, migration, and formal education systems that prioritize written texts and dominant languages. Yet, communities have developed strategies to sustain oral traditions. Storytelling sessions are conducted in schools, community centers, and ritual gatherings, allowing youth to learn chants, genealogies, and epic performances firsthand. Digital media, including audio recordings, video documentation, and social media, supplements oral transmission, enabling both local and diaspora communities to access narratives of the four brothers and other ancestral heroes. Collaborative projects with anthropologists and cultural institutions further support preservation by archiving texts, providing notation for chants, and teaching performance techniques. This dual approach, live oral performance and modern documentation, ensures that Subanen epic narratives remain dynamic, adaptable, and accessible. Through these practices, the stories of ancestral choices, migrations, spiritual encounters, and communal ethics continue to guide contemporary Subanen life, demonstrating that oral literature is not merely history, but a living, evolving force that shapes identity, morality, and cultural continuity. For the Subanen, music is not merely entertainment. It is a vehicle of history, identity, and spirituality. Traditional songs performed during rituals, festivals, and everyday activities serve to preserve ancestral knowledge and encode moral and social values. Instruments such as gongs, bamboo flutes, drums, and bells accompany dances, chants, and epic recitations, creating a multisensory experience that reinforces memory and community cohesion. Music often marks important transitions, the planting and harvesting of crops, river blessings, or the preparation for the bucklog. Each melody, rhythm, and tonal pattern carry symbolic meaning, often reflecting natural elements like the flow of rivers, the movement of the wind, or the rhythm of footsteps during migration. Elders teach these songs orally, ensuring that every note, chant, and rhythm remains true to its ancestral origin. Through music, the Subanen create a living archive of their history, celebrating the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, Mamulo, and the legacy of Tabunaway, ensuring that memory, identity, and cultural cohesion are continually reinforced in both ceremonial and everyday life. Storytelling is inseparable from music in Subanen culture. Epic narratives and family genealogies are often sung, blending oral literature with melody to enhance retention and engagement. Performances involve call and response techniques, rhythmic footwork, and instrumental accompaniment, creating a communal environment where participants actively internalize history and values. Storytelling sessions serve multiple functions. They educate the youth, reinforce social norms, and sustain spiritual awareness. Heroes of the past, such as the three brothers who migrated from Cotabato, are celebrated through elaborate song cycles, emphasizing their choices, courage, and ethical conduct. These narrative songs allow communities to relive historical migrations, environmental challenges, and spiritual encounters, embedding lessons in rhythm, melody, and repetition. In essence, storytelling and music together create a dynamic medium through which the Subanen experience their cultural identity, ensuring that historical memory and moral instruction are interwoven with communal joy, ritual observance, and social cohesion. The modern era presents both challenges and opportunities for Subanen music and storytelling. Urbanization, migration, and exposure to popular media threaten the continuity of traditional forms. Yet, contemporary initiatives have enabled preservation and adaptation. Digital recording, archiving, and dissemination via social media allow diaspora communities to maintain access to ancestral songs and narratives. Schools, cultural organizations, and festivals integrate traditional music into educational programs, ensuring that younger generations continue to learn performance techniques, rhythms, and storytelling conventions. Innovative collaborations with musicians and anthropologists help document, notate, and teach complex melodies and chants, bridging oral tradition with modern educational methods. Despite technological intervention, the essence remains. Music and storytelling serve as vessels of memory, identity, and social cohesion. The journeys of the four brothers, The wisdom of elders and the spiritual relationship with rivers and forests continue to resonate through these melodies, demonstrating that Subanen music is not static, but a living, adaptive, and profoundly integrative aspect of cultural survival and communal identity. The architecture of the Subanen reflects both environmental adaptation and social organization. Traditional houses, often built on stilts above riverbanks or slightly elevated ground, are designed to withstand flooding, facilitate ventilation, and protect from wild animals. Bamboo, nipa, and hardwood are the primary materials, chosen for durability and availability, and construction techniques have been refined over centuries to balance practicality with aesthetic expression. Houses are often rectangular, with steep thatched roofs, open ventilation, and raised platforms for sleeping, cooking, and socializing. Settlement patterns are closely linked to kinship networks and communal cooperation. Families cluster near rivers and fertile lands, ensuring access to water, transportation, and agricultural fields. Spatial organization is informed by both practical and spiritual considerations, with sacred trees, stones, or riverfront sites preserved within or near settlements. Community planning often incorporates shared spaces for ritual platforms, meeting areas, and work zones, reflecting the Subanen principle that social cohesion and environmental harmony are inseparable. These architectural practices embody centuries of accumulated knowledge, balancing survival, spirituality, and community interaction while reflecting the enduring influence of the ancestral journey of the Four Brothers. Central to Subanen settlements are communal spaces and ritual platforms that serve social, cultural, and spiritual functions. The bucklog platform, often the most prominent structure, is elevated and constructed from hardwood, bamboo, and rattan, designed to amplify sound during ceremonial dances. These platforms are not just functional. They encode symbolic meanings, often representing the universe, ancestral presence, and spiritual connection with rivers, forests, and mountains. Villages are oriented around these communal structures, ensuring that social and ritual life remains integrated. Open plazas, riverbanks, and communal paths are maintained for gatherings, ceremonies, and trade, facilitating both internal cohesion and interaction with neighboring communities. The planning of settlements also reflects ecological awareness. Water sources, agricultural plots, and forested areas are strategically preserved, demonstrating the Subanen's deep understanding of environmental stewardship. In this way, architecture and spatial organization are inseparable from culture, memory, and identity, embodying lessons learned from centuries of adaptation, migration, and negotiation with both nature and human neighbors. In the contemporary era, Subanen architecture has adapted to changes in lifestyle, technology, and economic circumstances. Modern materials like corrugated metal roofing, concrete posts, and processed lumber are often incorporated, especially in urban or semi-urban areas. However, traditional forms, elevated structures, and communal spaces remain culturally significant, often maintained for ritual purposes, festivals, or family heritage. Urban migration and land scarcity challenge traditional settlement patterns, yet communities strive to retain cultural identity through thoughtful design, maintaining elevated platforms, orientation toward rivers, and spaces for ritual activities. Planning now integrates infrastructure such as electricity, sanitation, and road access, while respecting the symbolic and practical features of ancestral architecture. These adaptations reflect a broader Subanen principle. Culture is not static, but evolves in dialogue with environmental pressures, social changes, and historical memory. The architecture of Subanen settlements continues to tell the story of the four brothers, preserving communal identity, spiritual connections, and ecological harmony even amid modern challenges, bridging past, present, and future through built form. For the Subanen, economic life has historically been intertwined with the rivers and fertile valleys they inhabit. Agriculture forms the backbone of subsistence and community wealth, with rice, corn, root crops, and vegetables cultivated through careful ecological knowledge passed down over generations. Farming practices are adapted to the rhythms of the river and seasonal cycles, incorporating sustainable techniques such as crop rotation, intercropping, and soil preservation. Fishing is equally essential. Rivers provide protein, trade goods, and ritual offerings, connecting sustenance to spirituality. Traditional fishing methods, often involving traps, nets, and seasonal regulations, reflect an understanding of ecological balance and community cooperation. Beyond survival, these activities foster social cohesion. Labor is often shared among families, with elders guiding younger members in techniques and ethical norms. Historical narratives, such as the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, emphasize movement along rivers and strategic settlement, demonstrating that livelihood is not merely about food production, but about continuity, adaptation, and the harmonious management of natural resources over centuries. Beyond farming and fishing, the Subanen have developed diverse economic activities rooted in craftsmanship and trade. Woven textiles, wood carvings, bamboo implements, and ritual objects are produced for both household use and exchange with neighboring communities. Trade networks extend across rivers, valleys, and into neighboring lowlands, allowing communities to barter surplus crops or crafted goods for salt, metal tools, and other essentials. Seasonal markets and reciprocal exchanges reinforce social bonds while ensuring economic stability. Craftsmanship is often intergenerational, with skills passed from elders to youth alongside cultural knowledge. Artisans imbue their work with symbolic motifs, reflecting ancestral beliefs, clan identity, and historical narratives, ensuring that economic activity also serves as a vessel for cultural transmission. Economic resilience is thus inseparable from cultural and social frameworks. Production, trade, and labor are conducted in a manner that sustains both livelihood and identity, echoing the lessons of adaptability and cooperation that have defined Subanen communities since the time of the Four Brothers. In contemporary times, Subanen communities navigate complex economic challenges, including land scarcity, urban migration, and market competition. While subsistence agriculture and river-based livelihoods remain vital, many households integrate modern income sources such as wage labor, small businesses, and participation in cooperatives. Communities often organize collective projects to enhance economic sustainability, such as shared rice mills, bamboo craft cooperatives, and ecotourism initiatives that showcase Subanen culture and environmental stewardship. Digital technology also plays a role, marketing crafts online, connecting with diaspora buyers, and accessing agricultural information help improve productivity and income while maintaining cultural relevance. Economic practices are therefore not merely survival mechanisms, but integrated strategies that reflect historical wisdom, environmental knowledge, and social cohesion. By balancing traditional livelihoods with modern opportunities, the Subanen continue to preserve cultural identity, maintain ancestral knowledge, and adapt to changing circumstances, ensuring that economic life remains both sustainable and culturally resonant for future generations. The Subanen language, known as Subanen or Subanon, forms a core component of cultural identity and historical continuity. Belonging to the Austronesian language family, it shares linguistic roots with neighboring groups in Mindanao, but it retains distinctive phonetic, syntactic, and lexical features that reflect centuries of independent development. Historical narratives, including the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, have been preserved through oral storytelling in the Subanen language, ensuring that both historical memory and moral instruction are conveyed accurately to successive generations. The language encapsulates the worldview of the people. Words related to rivers, forests, spirits, and ancestral obligations carry layered meanings, connecting everyday life with cosmology and ethical values. Place names, clan names, and ritual terms maintain historical significance, embedding ancestral journeys and spiritual teachings into the linguistic fabric. The Subanen language thus functions as both a practical tool for communication and a repository of cultural heritage, anchoring communities in their ancestral past, while providing a framework for navigating contemporary challenges. Subanen language is rich in morphology, idiomatic expressions, and oral techniques that enhance memorability and transmission. Epics, chants, and ritual instructions employ repetition, rhyme, and parallelism to reinforce meaning and aid memorization. Vocabulary includes terms specific to environmental elements, spiritual practices, kinship, and agricultural techniques, reflecting the integrated worldview of the Subanen. Oral expression is highly performative, often accompanied by gestures, rhythm, and melodic intonation, particularly during the bucklog or other ritual ceremonies. Linguistic structures are carefully maintained across generations, even as minor local variations emerge in dialects of northern, central, and southern Subanen communities. This flexibility allows the language to adapt to specific environmental or social contexts, while preserving the core of grammatical and semantic integrity. In this way, the Subanen language serves as a living archive, encoding ancestral knowledge, ethical frameworks, and communal memory, ensuring that every spoken word reinforces both identity and intergenerational continuity. The modern era poses significant challenges to the Subanen language, including urban migration, exposure to dominant languages like Cebuano, Tagalog, and English, and reduced use among younger generations. However, communities have developed multiple strategies for preservation. Schools and community programs teach Subanen literacy, oral storytelling, and song performance, ensuring that children learn both written and oral forms of the language. Digital technology, including audio recordings, social media, and online dictionaries, helps document, standardize, and disseminate linguistic knowledge. Collaborative projects with linguists, cultural organizations, and government agencies provide technical and institutional support, reinforcing local efforts. Festivals, ritual gatherings, and diaspora networks further contribute to maintenance, as communal use of the language reinforces identity and cultural memory. By blending traditional oral practices with modern tools, the Subanen ensure that their linguistic heritage remains vibrant, adaptive, and central to community life. The language continues to serve as both a medium of daily communication and a repository of centuries of ancestral wisdom, echoing the choices, journeys, and values of the forebrothers whose legacy still shapes contemporary Subanen identity. Education among the Subanen has historically been a communal and holistic endeavor, emphasizing not just literacy in a conventional sense, but the transmission of knowledge, ethics, spirituality, and survival skills. Learning began at home, where elders instructed children in the practices and beliefs that have been preserved since the migration of Dumalandalan Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. Agricultural skills, fishing techniques, herbal medicine, and crafting were taught alongside moral lessons, spiritual guidance, and cultural history. Storytelling, songs, and ritual participation functioned as pedagogical tools, allowing children to internalize knowledge through observation and participation. Apprenticeships with Balian or skilled artisans provided practical experience, teaching not only skills but the ethical frameworks underlying them. This system ensured that education was deeply embedded in daily life and communal practice, creating a seamless integration between survival, spirituality, and cultural preservation. Knowledge transmission was not limited to technical skills. It encompassed social organization, governance, and diplomacy, reflecting the broader historical experience of the Subanen in maintaining autonomy, negotiating with neighboring communities, and adapting to environmental challenges. With the advent of colonial and modern educational systems, Subanen communities have increasingly sought to integrate traditional knowledge with formal schooling. Local schools teach literacy, mathematics, science, and other standardized subjects, while community initiatives work to ensure that ancestral knowledge is maintained. Cultural classes, storytelling workshops, and participation in rituals allow youth to retain links to their heritage, reinforcing lessons about ecology, spirituality, and social cohesion that formal education may overlook. Parents and elders often serve as mentors outside school hours, complementing formal curricula with practical and ethical instruction rooted in ancestral wisdom. Educational initiatives are also tailored to bridge rural and urban experiences, ensuring that children who migrate to cities or join diaspora communities remain connected to language, ritual, and identity. This dual system demonstrates adaptability, reflecting the enduring Subanen principle that education is not only about acquiring technical knowledge, but about sustaining cultural memory, social cohesion, and intergenerational continuity. The transmission of knowledge continues to play a crucial role in community resilience. Rituals like the bucklog, agricultural calendars, and river ceremonies provide structured opportunities for teaching and reinforcing skills, ethics, and communal values. Youth participation in these activities fosters a sense of responsibility, belonging, and identity, ensuring that each generation internalizes both practical knowledge and cultural heritage. Modern tools such as recorded narratives, digital archives, and online educational programs supplement these traditional practices, allowing knowledge to be preserved even amidst migration and urbanization. Communities organize workshops and mentorship programs, often combining spiritual instruction with ecological education and historical awareness. Through these practices, education serves not only as a pathway for survival, but also as a mechanism for cultural resilience, ensuring that the legacy of the Four Brothers, the ethical, spiritual, and practical wisdom they embodied, continues to guide the Subanen people in navigating modern challenges while preserving identity, memory, and communal cohesion. Subanen art and craft reflect centuries of adaptation, spirituality, and social identity, preserving ancestral knowledge through tangible forms. Crafts include weaving, wood carving, bamboo work, basketry, and metal ornamentation, often used for both practical and ritual purposes. Patterns and motifs carry symbolic meaning, representing ancestry, natural phenomena, or spiritual concepts. Weaving, for instance, incorporates geometric designs and colors that signify clan identity, social status, and moral principles. Wood carvings embellish ritual platforms, homes, and sacred objects, serving as both decoration and vessels for ancestral presence. Metalwork, often used in jewelry or ceremonial implements, demonstrates technical skill alongside symbolic artistry, blending utility and spiritual significance. Material culture is therefore not purely functional. It conveys knowledge, status, belief systems, and historical memory. Craftsmanship is intergenerational, with elders teaching youth techniques, symbolism, and ethical practices, ensuring continuity and reinforcing communal cohesion through the act of creation. Ritual and ceremonial artifacts are central to Subanen material culture, particularly in practices such as the bucklog, river blessings, and harvest celebrations. Platforms, gongs, bamboo instruments, masks, and offerings are meticulously crafted to honor spirits, ancestors, and natural elements. Each object carries prescribed forms, materials, and rituals in its creation and use, reflecting an intricate understanding of spiritual ecology. For example, the bucklog platform is not merely a stage for dance, but a symbolic representation of the universe and a conduit for ancestral blessing. Objects are often made collectively, reinforcing social bonds, ethical responsibilities, and environmental stewardship. Sacred artifacts, whether carved amulets or ritual vessels, encode genealogical information, ancestral achievements, and moral lessons, functioning as tangible embodiments of history, spirituality, and identity. These artifacts ensure that every ceremonial act reinforces cultural memory, connects participants to their ancestors, and strengthens communal cohesion, illustrating that material culture in Subanen life is inseparable from the spiritual and historical continuum established by the four brothers and preserved across generations. Modern Subanen communities face challenges in maintaining traditional crafts due to urban migration, economic pressures, and exposure to mass-produced goods. Yet, adaptation and innovation ensure continuity. Contemporary artisans may incorporate new materials such as synthetic fibers or metals while retaining traditional motifs and symbolic forms. Community workshops, cultural festivals, and digital platforms facilitate skill sharing, market access, and education, bridging heritage with modern economic and social realities. Diaspora communities actively participate in cultural preservation, commissioning or reproducing ritual objects and crafts to maintain identity and spiritual connection. Through these efforts, material culture remains a dynamic interface between history, spirituality, and contemporary life. Crafts continue to embody ancestral knowledge, environmental understanding, and social ethics, allowing the Subanen to navigate modernity without losing the essence of identity. By preserving and adapting their material culture, the Subanen sustain the legacy of the four brothers, ensuring that ancestral wisdom, communal bonds, and spiritual values persist alongside practical innovation and cultural resilience. Among all Subanen festivals, the bucklog stands out as the most significant ceremonial event, integrating spirituality, community, and historical memory. Performed to express gratitude to ancestral spirits for bountiful harvests, abundant fish, or protection, the bucklog is both a ritual and a festival that reinforces communal cohesion. Platforms constructed from bamboo and hardwood serve as stages for rhythmic dances, accompanied by gongs, drums, and chanting. The choreography, sounds, and gestures are meticulously structured to communicate respect, invite blessings, and transmit ancestral knowledge. Seasonal ceremonies also celebrate planting, harvest, and river-related events, connecting communities to ecological cycles and reinforcing a spiritual understanding of environmental stewardship. Elders preside over rituals, guiding youth in proper conduct, offerings, and chants, ensuring the continuity of ethical and spiritual teachings. Each festival reflects centuries of adaptation, remembering the journeys of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, while emphasizing harmony between humans, spirits, and nature. These ceremonies transform communal memory into a performative experience, making history, spirituality, and ecology tangible and accessible to each generation. Subanen ceremonial life is rich in symbolic gestures, objects, and sequences that convey complex cultural meanings. Offerings to spirits, purification rituals, and blessings for water, fields, or harvest are integral components of festivals, emphasizing reciprocity between humans and the supernatural. Participants wear attire adorned with traditional motifs, jewelry, and ceremonial implements, each conveying ancestral lineage, social rank, or spiritual intention. Dance movements replicate natural rhythms, flowing like rivers, rising like the wind, or bending like bamboo, symbolically linking human action with environmental and spiritual cycles. Songs, chants, and epic recitations performed during ceremonies recount historical migrations, ancestral deeds, and moral lessons, embedding education within celebration. Festivals are also times for social negotiation, conflict resolution, and community decision-making, reflecting the Subanen principle that ritual and governance are intertwined. In essence, ceremonial life is a living classroom where ethics, history, spirituality, and communal solidarity are transmitted through collective participation, performance, and symbolic action, maintaining cultural resilience and intergenerational cohesion. Modern Subanen communities continue to perform festivals while adapting to contemporary social, economic, and environmental realities. Urban migration and diaspora participation have transformed ceremonies, incorporating new locations, audiences, and technologies, but core rituals, songs, and dances remain intact. Documentation through video, photography, and social media helps preserve ceremonial knowledge and reach younger generations distant from ancestral lands. Educational programs in schools and community centers include festival participation, storytelling, and ritual instruction, reinforcing identity and continuity. Festivals also serve as platforms for cultural tourism and economic development, showcasing Subanen heritage while respecting sacred practices. Through these adaptations, ceremonial life remains vibrant, ensuring that the ethical, historical, and spiritual teachings of the Four Brothers continue to resonate. By celebrating festivals, the Subanen transform memory into lived experience, connecting past, present, and future through ritual, music, dance, and communal participation, sustaining identity and cultural resilience in a rapidly changing world. The Subanen possess a profound understanding of their natural environment, shaped by centuries of settlement along rivers, uplands, and fertile valleys. Their ecological knowledge is inseparable from spiritual and cultural practices, reflecting a worldview where rivers, forests, mountains, and wildlife are imbued with ancestral presence. Hunting, fishing, and farming are guided not only by practicality, but by ethical codes that preserve balance and sustain resources. Sacred sites, including certain rivers, springs, trees, and caves, are protected by taboos and rituals, ensuring ecological stability while fostering spiritual reverence. This deep environmental awareness is transmitted orally through storytelling, rituals, and apprenticeship, embedding practical knowledge alongside moral guidance. The choices of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo to relocate and respect ancestral lands demonstrate early principles of environmental stewardship, setting precedents for sustainable living. Today, these practices continue to influence how communities manage forests, waterways, and farmlands, demonstrating that environmental conservation is both a practical necessity and a spiritual duty. Ritual life among the Subanen is intricately tied to environmental knowledge. Ceremonies like the bucklog are not only spiritual expressions, but also reinforce sustainable interaction with natural resources. Offerings, songs, and dance patterns often encode guidance for planting cycles, water management, and wildlife respect. Certain areas are designated as off-limits or sacred, reflecting an ethical approach to resource management that ensures regeneration and biodiversity. Local lore describes rivers as lifelines and forests as repositories of spirits and ancestors, reminding individuals of their interdependence with the environment. Traditional leaders and elders act as both spiritual guides and ecological stewards, mediating the community's relationship with natural resources. This sacred ecology provides both a framework for survival and a moral compass for behavior, demonstrating that environmental knowledge is inseparable from cultural, spiritual, and social life, forming a holistic worldview that has sustained the Subanen across centuries. Contemporary Subanen communities face unprecedented environmental challenges, including deforestation, river pollution, mining, and climate change. Despite these pressures, traditional ecological knowledge continues to guide sustainable practices. Communities integrate ancestral wisdom with modern scientific understanding to protect watersheds, manage forests, and cultivate resilient crops. Education programs, conservation initiatives, and advocacy efforts often draw upon sacred ecological principles, emphasizing ethical responsibility alongside practical measures. Diaspora and urban communities also participate, maintaining cultural memory and environmental ethics even when physically distant. By blending traditional knowledge with modern conservation strategies, the Subanen ensure that rivers, forests, and sacred sites remain protected for future generations. In doing so, they continue the legacy of the four brothers, whose migrations and choices embodied a deep respect for land, water, and the unseen forces that sustain life, demonstrating that environmental knowledge is both a cultural inheritance and a practical guide for survival in a rapidly changing world. The Subanen diaspora is not a recent phenomenon. Historical patterns of migration have existed since the times of Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo. Their initial movements across rivers, uplands, and coastal areas laid the groundwork for a community accustomed to relocation and adaptation. These early migrations were motivated by ecological necessity, political pressures, and spiritual beliefs, establishing a precedent for mobility that persists in modern times. As economic, educational, and social opportunities expanded, Subanen communities migrated to other parts of Mindanao, the Visayas, and even abroad. Cities offered employment, formal education, and health care, while overseas migration provided access to global networks, trade opportunities, and cultural exchange. Despite physical distance, diaspora communities maintained strong ties with ancestral lands through ritual participation, storytelling, and material culture, ensuring that identity, language, and tradition continue to shape communal cohesion. This enduring mobility demonstrates the Subanen principle that cultural survival depends on both adaptation and fidelity to ancestral knowledge, a lesson rooted in the historical journeys of the four brothers. For Subanen communities living outside traditional homelands, maintaining cultural identity is both a challenge and a priority. Diaspora networks emphasize communal gatherings, ritual practice, language use, and cultural education as ways to sustain connection with ancestral heritage. Festivals like the Bucklog are recreated in diaspora contexts, often adapted for smaller spaces or urban environments, while traditional music, dance, and crafts serve as tangible links to cultural memory. Educational programs teach language, genealogy, and ritual practices, enabling younger generations born abroad to understand their roots. Social media, digital storytelling, and online communities facilitate interaction between dispersed Subanen groups, creating a transnational network that strengthens cultural transmission. Even at a distance, communal ethics, environmental stewardship, and spiritual awareness are reinforced, reflecting the integrated worldview of their ancestors. In this way, diaspora engagement becomes both a strategy for identity preservation and a continuation of historical practices of movement, adaptation, and intergenerational knowledge transmission. Subanen diaspora communities also engage in global networks that provide economic, educational, and social opportunities. Many participate in trade, business ventures, and cooperative projects that support both local and ancestral communities. Knowledge exchange programs, collaborations with cultural institutions, and participation in international conferences help document and promote Subanen heritage globally. Modern technologies, including video conferencing, digital archiving, and online marketplaces, facilitate cultural preservation while allowing communities to benefit from globalization. Despite these modern interventions, the principles of ethical responsibility, communal cohesion, and spiritual respect remain central. The diaspora experience reflects centuries of adaptive resilience, echoing the historical journey of the four brothers: strategic movement, cultural fidelity, and environmental awareness. By navigating modern opportunities while preserving ancestral knowledge, Subanen communities ensure that identity, tradition, and history remain vibrant, bridging local roots with global presence and connecting past, present, and future in a continuous cultural continuum. Subanen communities have long relied on a system of governance that integrates familial hierarchy, communal decision-making, and spiritual guidance. Leadership traditionally rests with elders and recognized datas who possess wisdom, knowledge of customary law, and understanding of ancestral practices. Decisions are made through consensus during council meetings, often held in communal spaces near the river or the village center. Leadership is not merely administrative. It encompasses dispute resolution, ritual oversight, and guidance on agricultural, fishing, and trade matters. Historical precedent, traced back to the times of the four brothers, highlights the importance of balancing authority with communal consultation. Leaders are expected to maintain harmony within the community, protect sacred sites, and ensure adherence to moral and spiritual codes. Their legitimacy derives not only from lineage, but also from demonstrated ethical conduct, knowledge, and ability to mediate conflicts. This governance system reinforces social cohesion, ensuring that communal harmony and ancestral traditions remain central to everyday life. Conflict resolution among the Subanen emphasizes mediation, reconciliation, and restorative justice rather than punitive measures. Disputes may arise over land, resources, or personal grievances, but resolution always seeks to restore harmony and maintain communal relationships. Mediators, often elders or ritual specialists, facilitate dialogue between parties, ensuring that each perspective is heard and that decisions respect ancestral customs and spiritual considerations. Compensation, ceremonial apology, or public acknowledgement may accompany resolutions, symbolically reinforcing ethical and social norms. Conflicts are seen not merely as personal disagreements, but as disruptions to communal balance, requiring both practical negotiation and spiritual reconciliation. Storytelling and reference to historical examples, including the migrations and choices of the four brothers, are used to remind participants of shared values, ancestral wisdom, and the importance of maintaining unity. These mechanisms have ensured the survival of Subanen social cohesion across centuries, even in the face of external pressures from colonial and modern state systems. In modern times, Subanen governance operates alongside national legal frameworks while maintaining customary practices. Community councils and datas collaborate with municipal governments to address land rights, resource management, and social services. Ritual oversight continues to complement formal governance, particularly in dispute resolution and cultural preservation. Educational programs teach younger generations about both customary and formal governance systems, ensuring continuity and adaptability. Challenges such as land encroachment, migration, and economic pressures require innovative approaches that honor ancestral wisdom while complying with contemporary laws. By blending traditional leadership, consensus-based decision-making, and modern institutional collaboration, Subanen communities maintain social cohesion, cultural identity, and effective governance. The legacy of the four brothers, balancing autonomy, ethical responsibility, and communal welfare, continues to shape how Subanen communities navigate both internal and external challenges, preserving historical principles while engaging with contemporary societal structures. Subanen religious life is deeply rooted in animism, the belief that all elements of nature, rivers, forests, mountains, and animals, possess spiritual essence. Ancestors, including figures like Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, are revered as guides and protectors whose wisdom continues to influence contemporary life. Sacred sites, such as specific river bends, large trees, or caves, are often associated with ancestral presence, and rituals are performed to honor these spirits, seeking blessings for health, fertility, and agricultural abundance. Offerings, chants, and dances serve as conduits of communication with the unseen world, reinforcing moral codes and social norms. This worldview emphasizes interconnectedness. Humans, nature, and spirits are mutually dependent, and ethical conduct toward the environment is inseparable from spiritual practice. Daily activities, from farming to fishing, are conducted with ritual awareness, reflecting centuries of accumulated wisdom on survival, ecological balance, and social harmony. Ancestral worship is not merely symbolic. It constitutes a framework for ethical living, community cohesion, and environmental stewardship. Rituals form the core of Subanen religious practice, integrating music, dance, and oral storytelling. The bucklog, the most prominent ceremonial event, exemplifies this synthesis, involving elevated platforms, rhythmic gongs, bamboo instruments, and choreographed dances to honor spirits and ancestors. Rituals often include offerings of food, rice wine, and symbolic objects, with elders or Balian ritual specialists, leading ceremonies to ensure proper invocation and ethical adherence. Spiritual specialists also provide guidance in healing, divination, and mediation, serving as intermediaries between the human and spiritual worlds. Knowledge of sacred chants, ritual sequences, and offerings is transmitted orally, ensuring that spiritual authority is both educational and participatory. These practices reinforce collective memory, ancestral wisdom, and social cohesion, while linking daily subsistence and environmental management to spiritual responsibility. Through ritual, the Subanen maintain a living connection with their ancestors, ensuring continuity of belief, and practice across generations. Modern Subanen communities navigate a complex spiritual landscape influenced by Islam, Christianity, and globalization. While many Subanen have converted to or adopted elements of other religions, traditional beliefs persist, often blending with newer faiths in a syncretic manner. Rituals continue to be performed during key life events: birth, marriage, death, planting, and harvest, while traditional chants, dances, and offerings are adapted to contemporary contexts. Cultural festivals, educational programs, and community initiatives incorporate spiritual teachings to reinforce identity and continuity. Diaspora communities maintain ancestral practices through digital documentation, online rituals, and transnational gatherings, ensuring that spiritual knowledge transcends geographic boundaries. These adaptations demonstrate the resilience and dynamism of Subanen religious life, rooted in ancestral worship and ecological ethics, yet capable of engaging with changing social, cultural, and spiritual realities. The legacy of the Four Brothers remains central, shaping ethical frameworks, ritual practice, and cultural identity, while guiding communities in sustaining both spiritual and ecological balance in modern times. The story of the Four Brothers, Tabunaway, Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo, remains a central thread in Subanen identity, serving as both historical memory and ethical guide. Elders recount how the brothers made pivotal choices that shaped generations. Tabunaway embraced Islam and political alliance, establishing noble lineages in Cotabato and Lanuo, while Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo journeyed into the mountains and valleys of the Sultanate Peninsula, preserving ancestral traditions and founding what would become the Subanen people. Genealogies, oral epics, and ritual narratives ensure that every generation remembers these foundational figures. This knowledge is embedded not only in stories, but in daily life, from settlement patterns along rivers to ethical practices in agriculture, fishing, and resource management. Ancestral lineage informs social hierarchy, leadership roles, and ceremonial responsibilities, linking contemporary families to historical decisions and moral exemplars. By tracing kinship back to the Four Brothers, Subanen communities maintain a living connection to history, demonstrating that memory, morality, and identity are intertwined in every aspect of life. Cultural practices such as music, dance, rituals, storytelling, and craft production all reflect the enduring influence of the Four Brothers. The bucklog, river ceremonies, weaving, carving, and oral epics carry lessons about cooperation, spiritual awareness, and environmental responsibility that are directly traceable to ancestral experiences. Communities across the Sultanate Peninsula, from Lapuyan and Lakewood to Pagadian, Sibugay, Sindangan, Dipolog, and Katapunan, maintain distinctive local practices that honor the legacy of the respective brothers who settled there. Festivals, communal work, and ritual participation reinforce social cohesion and intergenerational transmission, creating a sense of belonging that is simultaneously local and connected to a shared historical narrative. This continuity allows the Subanen to navigate contemporary challenges, migration, economic pressures, and urbanization, while maintaining ethical, spiritual, and communal values rooted in ancestral wisdom. The story of the Four Brothers serves as a constant reminder that identity is cultivated through history, choice, and collective responsibility, providing a framework for communal life that is resilient, adaptive, and deeply ethical. The continuing legacy of the Four Brothers also inspires modern Subanen engagement with education, environmental stewardship, and cultural preservation. Schools, community programs, and digital platforms document genealogies, oral literature, rituals, and craft techniques, ensuring that younger generations retain knowledge of their heritage. Environmental ethics rooted in ancestral spiritual beliefs guide contemporary resource management, while diaspora networks extend cultural continuity across geographic boundaries. Modern Subanen leaders draw inspiration from the brothers' decisions, balancing adaptation with fidelity to tradition to navigate political, social, and economic challenges. Through festivals, rituals, crafts, and storytelling, communities sustain a living connection to historical memory, creating a bridge between past, present, and future. The narrative of the four brothers thus becomes a guiding principle for cultural survival, communal resilience, and ethical living. It exemplifies how historical choices, spiritual awareness, and social cohesion continue to shape identity, offering lessons in loyalty, courage, and harmony that resonate in the lives of Subanen people today and for generations to come. And that was the remarkable journey of the four brothers, a story of courage, loyalty, and the enduring bond between humans, nature, and spirits. Today, we learned how Tabunaway embraced Islam and noble leadership, while Dumalandalan, Gumabonabon, and Mamulo preserved the ancient ways, giving birth to the Subanen people. We saw the rivers, rituals, and traditions that shaped their lives and guided generations. The moral of the story is clear. History is not only about events, but about the choices we make, the values we uphold, and the legacies we leave behind. Respect for nature, commitment to family and community, and fidelity to one's principles can echo across centuries. If you enjoyed this journey and want to explore more untold stories from the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell on History Teller YT so that you can continue traveling through time with us. Until next time, let the stories of our ancestors inspire your path forward.